Dr. Shamia, I can see you. If you could just do a quick mic check for me.
I'm here. I'm going to change my name, but I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you.
Great.
And let's see, who else have I missed?
That was David Brace. I just saw something.
Yeah. Yes, David Brace. I think you popped up. Can you do a mic check for us as well?
He's going to report.
Check. You hear me?
We gotcha. Thank you.
I've had some unstable internet. I've been working at home all day, so I've got my phone. If it gets bad, I'll switch over.
Okay, so far so good. Thank you.
Roger that.
Let's see, Dr. Souza, if you can pop your camera on and do a quick mic check.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Thank you. Let's see. Diana Drake, I see you're back in. Can you turn your camera on and do a quick mic check?
Do I turn my camera on?
Yes, please. If you can turn your camera on just so we can make sure everything's okay. Let's see. In the meantime, Mayor Jacobs, if you can turn your camera on and do a quick mic check.
Hello. Can you hear me?
All right. Thanks, Mayor. We got you.
Okay, do you see me now?
I can see you and we can hear you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Dr. Gocher, we can see you. Can you do a quick mic check for us?
So here's my mic check. Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Narda, are you on? It looks like you're on the meeting. I had a question for you if you have a moment.
Yes, sir.
So I have a agenda before me that was printed up on, or looks like it was distributed on July the 27th. Do we have a newer agenda? I thought I saw one online, but I don't think that the ladies in the office printed it out for me.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Maybe it's the same one. There looked like there were 12 items on this. Is that
That's
the
correct.
Okay, all right, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like it is right at 5 o'clock, and as I look at our participant list, I think we've got everybody here. Either Dr. Buchanan or Narda, is there anybody that you see that's not on that list that we need to wait for?
No, sir, I believe everyone is accounted for.
Okay, great. So the first thing we need to do is to establish a quorum after our call to order. So I think we'll start with a roll call, if you would.
Yes, sir. Drake? Diana?
She's got to get unmuted.
Unmute yourself.
Present.
Thank you. Dr. Gocher?
Present.
Hurt?
Present.
Jacobs?
Present.
O'Brien?
Present.
Shamia?
Present.
Souza?
Here.
Wagner?
Present.
Thank you.
Very good. So the next item is approval of the minutes from the July 22nd, 2020 meeting. And I believe these have been distributed electronically. And I want to make sure that everybody's had a chance to look over those. And if having looked over those, if there are any additions, corrections, substitutions, anything that we need to change in terms of the minutes of the meeting. Hearing none, I'll accept a motion for approval of the minutes in a second.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, we'll have a roll call vote on that. So Narda, if you'll go through the roll for us.
Drake?
Yes.
Gocher?
Yes.
Hurt?
Yes.
Jacobs?
Yes.
O'Brien?
Yes.
Shamia?
Yes.
Souza?
Yes.
Wagner?
Yes.
Thank you. Passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one additional thing we need to do, and I got a note from Mr. Morton about this earlier today, and that is we need to have a voice or a individual roll call vote to approve the agenda. So does everybody, first of all, have a copy of the agenda, or are you familiar with the agenda? Has it been distributed to everyone?
This is Drake, yes.
Okay. And if,
Dr. Booker, I would actually like to add an item to the agenda if I could, please.
sure.
This is a motion to postpone this meeting until next Wednesday. This board has become a policymaking body. It is also a very powerful body, making decisions that impact the lives of 470,000 Knox Countyans. Currently, with the powers vested by the governor, this unelected board is more powerful than the Knox County Commission, the Knoxville City Council, and any other body that governs our community. Despite this power, this board offers no recourse to our taxpayers, no due process, and is virtually unaccountable for its actions. It is also the only body which does not currently allow for in-person public input at its meetings. Sending an email is not the same as actually being able to speak in person. County Commission, City Council, and the Board of Education all allow citizens to have an opportunity to speak at their meetings for up to 5 minutes. In addition, we must recognize that some citizens of this county do not have access to broadband and therefore cannot view this meeting. It's unacceptable. It is vital that a body such as this operate with full transparency in a public setting, something that we're not doing right now. If we expect the public to have confidence in the decisions being made by this body, this has to change. Therefore, in the spirit of democracy and transparency, I move that this meeting be postponed until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. in the large assembly room of the City County building in a public forum in which citizens can voice their concerns be added to that agenda.
And so in adding that to the agenda, I think we need to have a vote on the agenda, including that, or Mr. Morton, help us out with this. Do we need to vote specifically for that addition, or do we vote for the agenda, including that addition as a whole?
Mr. Chairman, you need to approve, everybody on the board needs to approve the agenda with that new item on it, and then you proceed through the agenda, Mr. Chairman. Answer your question.
So with the approval of the board, and we may need a voice vote on this, an individual roll call vote, I would move that we put this as the first order of business in the agenda, so we don't go through the whole agenda before we get to it to postpone a meeting. And I assume, Mayor, that this is a postponement, a definite postponement, and not.
No, it would be next Wednesday, same time, just in person. Yes, sir. It would be, I'm proposing that we have a 5 p.m. meeting next Wednesday in large assembly room.
Okay. So we have a, I guess we'll do this in the form of a motion. And so, Mayor, that would be your motion to alter or to add to the agenda of the meeting. And we need a second on that and then some discussion. Do we have a second? I would like to second it so we can discuss it. So the motion is, if Mr. Morton, if that's appropriate for me as chair to second, I can do that. Okay, Mr. Morton?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it is appropriate. You can second it. Yes.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. Discussion.
Just a clarification, at this particular moment, all we're doing is voting on the addition to the agenda. That then we're going to subsequently discuss the item. Is that correct?
So we have to vote, James, on the addition to the agenda. And then once we have voted on that, we have to vote on the agenda in total.
Understood.
Okay. So discussion on the addition to the agenda.
Mayor, in addition to moving the meeting, postponing this meeting to next Wednesday, there were some other things you said, and I didn't catch all of them. I'm sorry. Can you?
We add a public forum.
And you want to have it in the large assembly room?
Yes.
Assembly room? Okay. I have concerns about that, having an in-person meeting, given the challenges with social distancing in that room.
County Commission does it, Dr. Buchanan.
They're not social distancing very well, I would argue.
Well, I would argue that we can social distance. The room seats up to 400 as it is, and you've been in the County Commission meeting, so you've been there.
Just to, again, to clarify a point of order, right now we're just voting on whether that gets to the agenda to be formally discussed. That's all we're voting on right now. Is that correct?
Correct. Mr. Morton, that is correct as our legal counsel, right?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. You're trying to set the agenda.
Right.
Correct.
So as a point of discussion, Dr. Buchanan, help me with this. My understanding was that the governor had either requested or required that public meetings until the end of August be done virtually. Is that true? Is that a suggestion, or was that an executive order?
It's an allowance. He's allowing public meetings to be held virtually because they normally are not allowed to be held virtually.
Right.
So it's an allowance. It's not mandated.
It's an option.
Choice.
So it's an option.
It's a choice. Yeah, it's an option.
And the option for a public meeting would be within the bounds of that executive order.
Yeah, you're all face-to-face meetings are allowed. Yes.
Okay.
So guys, I'll have plenty to say about the motion. I just need to know the right time to say it. I think we're just trying to set the agenda at this moment, and I understand. So just help me out.
So we are discussing a motion to postpone definitely this meeting until 1 week from today and to have it in a public forum when we have it.
I need clarification. My understanding is right now we are considering voting on whether or not to add this to the agenda. If it is added to the agenda, my understanding is then we can discuss it further and vote on the actual proposition, not just adding it to the agenda. Is that not?
So my understanding is that we are voting to add this to the agenda. And once it has been added, I would also say as if it's added to the agenda, it would be the first order of business because it wouldn't be in the spirit of that resolution or to have it at the end because you'd have the whole meeting and then you'd have a motion to not have the meeting at that time. So we would have it on the agenda if you vote in the affirmative. We'd have it on the agenda and have it as the first order of the agenda.
I think just to move things along, we need to possibly go ahead and vote to add it to the agenda. Then let's have our discussion and get down to really what this means vis-a-vis a public health board versus an elected county or city commission. So we operate a little bit differently. So I would like to see if we could move ahead and add it to the agenda, and then we can have our discussion.
Okay. Is there any other discussion about adding?
You got to call the question, Dr.
Yes.
O'Brien.
Yeah, let's call the question.
Okay, so you wish to vote immediately. Is there any discussion about that? If not, we'll have a roll call vote in adding this as an agenda item as the first agenda item from Mayor Jacobs. So Narda, if you'll go through the roll, if we're ready, we can go ahead and have a roll call on that.
Drake,
Yes.
Gotcher,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
Yes.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Sousa,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you. Passed.
So our next order of business is to approve the agenda, and the agenda again has been amended to include Mayor Jacobs' point of the agenda as the very first. So is there any additional discussion about the entire agenda at this point? If not, I'll accept a motion for approval and a second.
Just a quick point of the, or I don't know if the order ends up, obviously we know what we have agreed to talk about first. Generally, Dr. Buchanan has given her benchmark update before I've given the hospital update. I didn't know if there was any particular intent of flipping those, but that has flowed well. And so that would be, I was intending to bring it up at the time, but if we have to march through in the order, it would just make more sense to keep it as we've done, which is benchmarks first and then my hospital update second.
So Mayor Jacobs, would you be amenable to having reports without any action if we decide to approve the agenda and postpone definitely this meeting for 1 week?
Yes.
So
yes, that'd be fine. Yes, sir.
So then the reports
We would be
okay.
I'm sorry.
Because we usually go over benchmark presentations and Dr. Shamia's presentation. There are other presentations as well about the federal visit to Knoxville and things like that. Would that be appropriate to go over, or do we need to do that in a public forum?
To be
opinion.
I think that'd be appropriate to do those things. I think the action items before we do that, that's when I like to have the vote about public input, please.
Okay.
And just to be clear, since we don't know what the outcome of that motion will be, I was just looking at the remainder of the agenda. And so I don't know if the order matters. That's all I was really getting at.
James, I think when we get to discussion, if we approve this agenda in that first discussion point, we can discuss, I think, whether or not that the definite postponement would be on action items only, whether it would be the entire meeting, whether it would allow reports. as I understand that. And Mayor, if we needed any clarification from your standpoint on your motion, we would be happy to talk about it at that next step in the meeting.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay. So we were at a point of discussing the entire agenda. We have approved the mayor's addition to the agenda as we I guess decided as the first point of the agenda. Is there any additional discussion, information that is necessary before we take a vote?
I'd like to ask maybe some of the staff or Mr. Morton, given that we are a public health board, what are the standards by which we operate versus a county commission or city council? We are a professional group. We are not a group, we do get input from the public. We have gotten lots of emails. I've gotten phone calls. I have people stop and talk to me. So we operate a little bit differently. We operate from a basis of evidence-based medicine and not purely emotional aspects, which there are a lot of emotions running high in the community. So that's the question. Does the Davidson County Board of Health have public forums? Does the Shelby County Board of Health have public forums? And is not what we're doing already with the ability to send us emails, which we have gotten hundreds, which I spent this afternoon going through what we've gotten, and the personal contacts, enough for us? Because again, we operate on a different level. We are not elected officials. We are not politicians. And we are a group that is supposed to look out for the public good, no matter what the politics are of it. So we need to really stay out of any politics and look at what the evidence shows us and look at the balance between our community's economics versus the public health aspect, and do the best we can at trying to make a path forward. So I'd like to get some input on what the standard might be if anybody knows.
This is Myers Morton. It's my advice that the board set the agenda and move on to each item where that would come up in one of the items.
So we are back to the point of further discussions on the entire agenda. Any other points of discussion about the entire agenda? Are we ready to vote? If so, I need a roll call vote on that. We've had it. Check Mr. Morton to make sure that we have had a motion and a second that's been approved on adoption of the entire agenda. Just want to make sure.
Not that I'm aware of.
Have we not had a motion and a second on the entire agenda, or have we?
We have not.
I move that we accept the agenda as amended.
Second. Okay, let's have a roll call vote on that if we are ready. Any other discussion? If not, we're ready for a roll call vote on that.
Drake,
Yes.
Gocher,
Yes?
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
Yes.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Sousa,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you.
Dr. Goetcher, before we begin, I have one more item. I apologize. It is now my duty as Knox County Mayor to advise this board that the Knox County Board of Health, along with Knox County, has been sued. I'm calling an executive session of the board to discuss this matter with the county's law department on Monday, August 3rd at 5 p.m. in the County Commission Conference Room, which is room 640 on the 6th floor of the City County Building.
Is that a meeting that the Board of Health will be attending?
It's, yes.
And the date again?
That is August 3rd, which is this coming Monday at 5 p.m. And it's the County Commission Conference Room, which is room 640 in the City County Building.
Mayor Jacobs, could you repeat that statement again?
Sure. So the Board of Health along with Knox County is being sued. So I'm calling an executive session of the board to discuss this matter with the law department. And Dr. Shmia, that's August 3rd, which is Monday at 5 p.m. in room 640 of the City County building, which is the County Commission conference room.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the first item of the agenda, as we have amended it, is a discussion of postponing definitely by 1 week the agenda of today's meeting. And I'm open for any discussion on that. We had informally talked about having reports and non-action items to be discussed as an update. And I don't know if we need a motion on that. I would assume that we would, to sort of divide our agenda into action and non-informational items and action items.
I'd request that Mayor Jacobs read it again, if that would be acceptable.
Sure. So my motion is that we postpone this meeting until next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Hold the meeting in the large assembly room in the City County building. We can also use the small assembly room if there's any overflow, and include a public forum on that agenda at which the public can put their input.
Mayor Jacobs, is it your understanding that we would not be able to discuss informational items at this meeting?
And I believe that we can discuss updates, but I believe that before this board takes any action, that we should allow that meeting to take place.
So is this the appropriate time for discussion, Dr. Gocher?
Yes.
So I have specific concerns about I understand that we've moved this first to the agenda, but at the same time, the way that this has been kind of conducted up to now is that the data that we review be the data that then guides potential decisions that we would make. And I would make the point that that would include the delay of any action for a week. So not knowing how the meeting is going to play out, not knowing what it is that we may view, and knowing that a 1 week time frame in the context of COVID-19 is a significant period of time from a public health perspective. And so this board it is very specifically the Board of Health, and its mission or its role should be to do things in the interests of public health. And so I think, quite frankly, it would be irresponsible to just make a decision that we are going to delay any sort of decision for a week in the environment, in the public health environment we're in right now. So I'm not saying that there will or will not be any decision, but I am personally not comfortable just on the front end saying we're not going to do anything for a week when I think it's well known that the events of a few days ago when Dr. Birx visited Nashville, and irrespective of which side that you're on that visit or on the content of that visit, I think that there needs to be a meeting this week that includes the potential for action. Now that to me is a separate conversation as to whether or not we could then do what Mayor Jacobs has proposed and do that other meeting or do the next meeting in the form that he has proposed. So I think my feelings on that are clear.
Jack, I'll just pitch in here too. This is one of those things that concerns me a little bit of holding off for a week too. Dr. Shmia is right. We have actionable data that we need to discuss. There may be actions we need to take for the public. And I do have a little bit of concerns of turning this into an open meeting, public forum with the public when we, again, are looking at evidence. We're looking at this in a scientific way versus trying to be swayed by the public. The public has been giving us input every day. We had input up until within the last hour that we've gotten in emails. And I've had phone calls today, and again, personal conversations within the last week. I am not in favor necessarily of putting this off till next week to just have an open forum for people to come to. We want them to give us their input. We want to hear what's going on, but then again, we have to step back, look at the data, and look at what we feel is best as the scientific presence here. Again, a board of health, not a county commission, not a city council, to deal with this. So I would hope that we could continue with our meeting and continue with using the Zoom meetings, which I think are safer for everybody concerned. I don't want to see something where we get down to the city county building and have lots of people there protesting or going one way or the other. That's not what we want. We don't want this to be a political football. We want it to be, again, us looking at this as who we are, as physicians, pharmacists, veterinarians, as the whole group here. And so I would just ask that we probably continue with what we're doing today and see where the chips lie. I don't know where we're going with this meeting until we hear the data and hear the reports.
I would also argue that if this was the intent, then this could have been presented 7 days ago as a proposal. And then we could have, if that was the direction we were going to go, we could have already made that arrangement and done that tonight.
Would you be amenable to having the next meeting with a public forum at the city county building? And because there are other bodies that are not elected, such as the Board of Zoning Appeals, the Ethics Committee, land use board, such as the Growth Policy Committee, that all do have public input as well. I certainly understand your concerns, Dr. Schmidt.
This is Maria Hurt here. I'd like to say something. Mayor Jacobs, you said something that really caught my attention, is that we are not being transparent, when in fact we are following the sunshine law. This meeting is sunshined, and I understand people want to have all our fellow citizens have a right and want to contribute their opinion, and we all, I'm sure, are reading the emails. I'm getting packets mailed to me at home, again, phone calls, just like many of my colleagues. So we're holding ourselves accountable to science and the evidence thus far in an evolving situation with a novel virus. So, we can't predict with absolute 100% accuracy, nor can we ever actually, even if the virus is familiar to us, what's going to happen. But we're doing our best to be transparent. And what I'd like to know is, where exactly in the law does it say we have to hold a public forum? Because that is different. That is a different thing than the Sunshine Law, which requires us to give advance notice and be, public, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd like to know specifically where in the law it says that we have to conduct this in a public forum in order to meet our obligations.
This is Myers Morton. This board, the Board of Health, is subject to the open meeting sunshine laws, just like any other board in the state that sets policy. That'd be city council, county commission, and the law applies to this board. It's subject to open meetings. And the only reason that it's on Zoom now is because the governor's passed an executive order suspending some of these rules, or suspending the requirement that some of these rules be followed. But this board is still subject to the sunshine open meetings laws. And
I'm not arguing that we not follow the law. My question is, what is the difference? How is holding a public forum, show me in the law where that is part of sunshining, holding a public forum.
That's what
I want to know. I'm not saying we want to do anything illegal or untoward. We don't. I want to know where the difference is.
That's a practical consideration. This board has to decide whether or not they want to have a public forum or not. There's no requirement that you have one, but that some people would think that makes sense to have a public forum, but that's what this board decides. Okay.
So a question I have is, does it make sense to separate these two issues? So one issue is, are we going to have tonight's meeting at all? And I've made my feelings on that very clear, including a meeting where we could take action if we felt appropriate. And then it seems a second issue is how our next meeting would be. I mean, depending on how that first issue gets resolved, how our next meeting would be conducted. And so to organize this conversation and our action, does it make sense to separate those two?
I'm fine with that. Yes, sir.
So the rules of order are, you guys have to help me a little bit on those, but so I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking, and then you guys help me with the rules of order. But I'm going to make a motion that we proceed, and there may be more discussion, but that we proceed with tonight's meeting as scheduled, including the ability to take action, with the intent that Mayor Jacobs, his request then be subsequently considered immediately following that first vote.
I'll second that.
So motion has been made for I guess you would say a complete meeting, a meeting that would involve both informational and action items today. And with a second motion that we'll make here, somebody will make, I hope, in a moment, that the following week's meeting would be an open meeting, a non-Zoom meeting that would be at the choice of the mayor or administration. Sounds like it would be the city county building main assembly room. So I think we need to look at both of those questions. Any further discussion? If not, I'll accept a motion for the agenda to include all administrative action and informational items at this meeting. Is there a motion out there for that?
Motion to proceed with tonight's meeting as planned, including action if warranted.
And I seconded that already, Jack.
Okay. Any further discussion about that motion? Hearing none, are we ready to vote? If so, let's do a roll call. Narda?
Diana Drake,
Yes.
Gocher,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
Yes.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Sousa,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you.
So still in this first agenda item is the next question about the place and format of the next meeting. And Mayor Jacobs, would you like to offer a motion that would be specific to what you're
I move that for the duration of this emergency, if possible, that meetings be held in a public forum, preferably at the city county building, large assembly room, and allow for a public forum where citizens have the ability to voice their concerns.
So there's been a motion. Is there a second? Hearing none, I'll second the motion for purposes of discussion. So the motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion?
My main just point of discussion, and Dr. Buchanan and Mayor Jacobs, I don't know, you may be best able to answer this, but I guess the question is, for every type of group gathering that I know is happening. There's the desire to not only socially distance, but I don't know how many people are going to come to this. And I can't think of a worse situation than the Board of Health. I mean, again, I know there may be other groups doing this, but for the Board of Health to conduct a public meeting in the setting of a pandemic and not do it in the best interest of the health of the people in the room. And so I guess my question would be, because again, I don't know how many, depends on, I guess, what we're talking about, how many people are going to be there. And there's clearly a desire to do this. And so how do we ensure that is done properly? Because as far as I know, based on the executive order, we're meeting every criteria that is required by the way we're doing this now. And so it's not that I can't be receptive to the idea, but this is the Board of Health, and we need the assurance that that could be done absolutely safely.
The Public Building Authority can help us with that. Of course, we have a mask mandate now, and we can also ensure social distancing. We could also have a first come, first serve where people have to sign up ahead of time, and we could limit the number of people that could be allowed to speak. So there are ways that the board, that we would be able to do this. When we became a policy-making board, things shifted. It's no longer an advisory committee. Now, this board is making policy. And some of those regulations actually override county ordinances. Therefore, I do believe that it's imperative, and I understand that science is driving this, but I do believe that it's imperative that we allow the public at least the opportunity to provide feedback in person.
Question. So when I hear you when you say we allow the community to provide feedback, but there are already systems in place to allow people to do that, and we get their feedback. I mean, all along the spectrum. I understand also what you're proposing, Mayor Jacobs, about people perhaps who don't have access to technology, and but they have a car and they want to drive to the meeting. I'm thinking from a pragmatic point of view. How do you keep people safe, and what are we going to put in place? Are we going to screen each and every single person, ask them to wear a mask? What if they don't want to wear a mask? Take their temperatures, keep a log. And I'm thinking from what we know, science shows us about gatherings of larger than 25 to 50 people. And we don't know how many people are going to come. Maybe 2,500 people are going to be in line wanting to come. Maybe only 2 people. I don't know. But there has to be system in place. Who's going to provide that system based on the science in terms of screening and protecting each other, people from infecting one another, should they be asymptomatic. So, there's that balance that I think you acknowledge that we need to find a balance in terms of making sure people have a voice. I understand that, but we also are talking about maintaining a balance in terms of people staying safe. And I just imagine the logistics of if indeed we vote to have a public forum, pulling that off. Who's going to pay for all that? I mean, that's staff power to screen everyone, etc.
RSV, marking off spaces.
Well, again, PBA can help us with that. And we already do these sort of things with county commission. And what we could do is people would have to sign up ahead of time to be able to speak. It would not. We could, you RSVP and so forth. And PBA already takes people's temperatures coming into the building. And so those, they are challenges, but there are things we actually face quite often anyway.
So question to Dr. Buchanan. Are there any regulations that are in place right now, depending on what phase we are in, that govern the size of public gatherings?
Currently, the size of public gatherings in Knox County is 50 people. Gatherings are to be limited to 50 people.
And that would include us, and that would include administrative folks as
Support
well,
staff.
right? So, Dr. Hurt, that may partially answer your question about how many people we could get in the large, when we were there, I think we were in the large assembly room the last time, if I remember right. And there were very few people that were there, but it looked like you could probably put 50 people in there with a 6 foot or more spread between people if they were masked, and we would probably be okay. Is either Dr. Buchanan or Mayor Jacobs, is that your opinion of the size of that room and the ability to adequately take care of that maximum number of people? I would imagine it would be in the low 40s or 40 or 41 people, something like that.
Based on the volume of emails, it could be higher. I mean, there's just a lot of email input. So PBA has that area marked off because they're holding court in there now. And so the seats are marked off. If people abide by that, which they don't always do, they move the seats around, then yes, there is social distancing. I think there's the potential to need to count heads and limit the number of people that come in the room. And if somebody's spoken, they can then leave, or you use the RSVP. I don't know how you do RSVPs for a public meeting. I've never been involved in that, so I'm not familiar with it. But yes,
people sign up in advance.
Mayor, is that commonly done for other administrative boards where you?
Yes, yes, sir. People sign up in advance. Yes, sir.
So that's certainly possible.
Yes.
And you've got the logistics to pull that off.
So
who, and again, I'm just not familiar with it. I know because I'm not involved in the infrastructure of organizing a city county or county commission meeting. Who would manage those RSVPs? And I know that's a detail.
That would just Dr. Buchanan. We could get with IT and determine how to do that and limit the number of people that could be allowed in. What we can also do is encourage people, and we do this at the county commission. If a number of people want to talk on the same topic, just one person speaks and arrange that beforehand.
I'd like to bring up one thing here that we just talked about, the numbers. If we had 50 as our number, I'm really concerned about getting together at a gathering like that. I think it's not, as a board of health, doesn't speak necessarily as well of us gathering people together when we are trying to keep people apart. That's where this way of doing things with the Zoom meeting allows us to do that. We have hundreds of people sending us emails already. And I'm not sure personally the benefit live of people pro and con over various aspects, how long a meeting would end up being, and whether it would change what we're doing based on the fact that we want to hear the data and we try to take that data and come up with good decisions based on it. So I don't mind hearing people. If we wanted to, if we really needed to, we could do it in this venue and let people go to a place where they could stand in front of a camera if they can't get in front of their own phone, and could do something of that sort. But I'm not even sure how beneficial that is to the process of us making great decisions for our public.
So Dr. O'Brien, my take on this, from what the mayor has said, this is my opinion, is that you have or you should offer the public the maximum amount of transparency. And if there are one or two people that feel that they're disenfranchised because they don't have broadband or they don't have a phone or internet connection, that they at least theoretically have the potential to walk in and at least listen or have their voice heard within reason. We can't have more than the prescribed number of people, which is for that size room probably safe. If we are masked with N95s, which maybe we would all want to be, nobody would probably be at a significant risk. And it would at least allow that potential for someone. I would personally rather have that potential for someone to come in and have nobody in the audience than to say we're not going to do that. That's my opinion.
Well, one thing I might recommend if we wanted to go this way, and I'm not still leaning that way, is that we still do a Zoom meeting. People could make appointments if we decide to do this and come down to the city county building where they are on the screen for a prescribed period of time, that we have just a certain amount of time set aside. And those are then made part of the meeting at that time. Again, I'm not sure how that will affect what we do. We are different than elected officials. We don't have a single constituency other than one. That's the entirety of our county. And so we have to try to balance out all of that and make the best decisions as we can. But I would not be in favor of us going to the city county building and having people in front of us, but I would rather continue with a Zoom meeting. And if there's a desire to have some transparency with people coming forward, we schedule them, they come in, we have maybe 30 minutes of time to have that at the beginning of the meeting. So there's maybe a total of every 5 minutes, we'll do 30 minutes worth, and first come, first serve. And we listen to them in this format, and then we go about our meeting. I don't want to get into something where we have people there, there's a contentious back and forth. That's not what we're here for. We do want this to be something where we act in the best interest of our public. So I like to move that way, and let's have some more discussion right now.
I would make one comment. I would remind the board members that we are able to do Zoom meetings only because of the governor's executive order. And without that executive order, we would be in public meetings right now. So we have a window of time that we're in Zoom meetings, but it is not indefinite. August, unless the governor renews the executive order on August 29th, we resume to open meetings just the way that we've been discussing. So those meetings are going to happen unless there's a new executive order at the end of next month. This is, seems to me an option to do that sooner, but it's probably going to happen unless something changes in terms of the governor's executive order. So we have a temporary stay of things right now, I guess is the way I would be looking at it.
So just a few things. First of all, I mean, I think the executive order is there for a reason. Secondly, I do think Dr. O'Brien's idea of, for those people who don't have the internet, they can go to a location and then connect with us on Zoom. But I mean, the other part of this is that, and I know this is with a lot of things going on in society, but as you get 50 or more people in a room right now, there is a very good chance, statistically based on where we are, that one of them has asymptomatic COVID. I mean, that's where we are based on our growth rate. And so, that is, again, we're the board of health. And so there is, whether you think 50 is the right number or 25 is the right number or whatever it may be, I would feel much, I think Dr. O'Brien, I don't know if it can be operationalized, but Dr. O'Brien's idea about a place where people, if they signed up, could be on camera and connect with us with Zoom accomplishes the exact same thing that all of us being together in person does.
I think that's a great compromise, and I would be supportive of that.
Let me just bring up, I don't know what the comments time is normally in public meetings. Somewhere 3 minutes to 5 minutes would be my range. And I don't know if you sometimes will look ahead and ask, okay, what do you want to talk about? Because you're right, Mr. Mayor, we don't want to have, everybody talk on one agenda item the same way. So we need to have some balance, and somebody's going to have to, question them and set that up. But what's the time that's used right now?
And what we could, it is generally 3 to 5 minutes, Dr. O'Brien. And what we do is they do have to fill out a form about what they want to talk about, if they pre-register. And we could certainly work on putting that in place and have it in place by the next meeting.
So we've been discussing the motion, and Mr. Morton, correct me, or Narda, correct me if we have not made and seconded this motion, but I believe we have. It's been several minutes about whether this meeting that we're having today is going, I believe we have a motion second on this, that the meeting is administrative, informational, and actionable items. Is that correct? So we're all on the same page.
Narda, I mean, as far as I know, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second to continue this meeting really in the same format, meaning that administrative, informational, and actionable items are all going to be legitimate for this meeting. Any other discussion on that motion?
So forgive me, I'm a little confused. So we've voted that tonight's meeting is our normal meeting with data and action if needed. And now I think we've reached essentially I don't know if we have, but we've discussed a compromise to what Mayor Jacobs initially presented. And so I don't know if that means that there needs to be a new motion.
James, I believe the motion on the floor is the one that I believe you made, but it's been several minutes ago, and that is that the meeting tonight is going to be, in essence, a full meeting.
Did we vote? Did we vote on that passed?
Did we pass that? Help me with it. So we're talking now about the next meeting.
So I would like to introduce a substitute motion.
Okay.
That at the next meeting via Zoom, we include a public forum that would be done remotely. And of course, with the contingency that Knox County is able with technology to provide that.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion on that motion?
But just simply, what would be I mean, Mayor Jacobs, you think that can be provided, or?
I have to look into it, but I think it can be provided. We also need to determine how much time we could allot. Half an hour is per Dr. Bryant's suggestion, and 3 minutes per person. So.
Okay, so in the event for some reason that it couldn't be accomplished, I mean, how would we decide what our course of action is if
it can't be, we make up the rules, for a lot of this committee. So if it can't be, we just can't include it. And we may not be able to pull it off by next week.
Okay.
But when it becomes, how about this? If the technology is available through Knox County, we provide the public an opportunity to comment via Zoom for 3 minutes, maximum of half an hour of this board. I think that's it, isn't it? Okay.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, motion second.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
We have a second on this motion, correct?
Yes, Jack, I did it.
Okay, so motion and second, discussion.
Okay.
Dr. Hurt.
So we are voting on having a public forum via Zoom as part of increasing our transparency. Am I correct? So far, yes, okay. In terms of it being contingent on technology, my understanding is that hasn't County Commission, maybe City Council done the very same thing, had public forum via Zoom? And if so, then, I mean, that's encouraging to me that, we should anticipate that we will have the technology and it will work.
It sounds,
That's one thing I'm thinking of. Can anyone give me some insight?
it sounds as if the technology is available. Mayor Jacobs, is that a fair assessment?
I believe that it would be, but I have to confirm with our IT department. So they may not like me very much when I bring this idea to them. But as Dr. O'Brien, I'm sure that there's a way that we could, whether we, I'm sure there's a way we can provide it. Yeah, exactly. And even if we can't provide it here at the building, if there's some sort of link that people can use from home or something like that, I will research that and look into it. I
would hope that somebody could bring their phone to the city county building and let let the public come in front of them and use their phone to be part of the conversation. So it should be something that could be set up.
To answer your question, Dr. Hurt, I'm not sure if when county commission was meeting virtually, if they had public forum as part of their meeting. Mr. Myers or Mr. Morton, I mean, or David Brace has something to say about that. Mute yourself, David.
I don't want it, Dr. Gocher, this is David Brace with the city and Mayor Jacobs. City Council utilizes Zoom and does public forums, so I'm sure that Will Johnson, the city recorder, can make that happen. And people don't have to come to the city county building unless they did not have access. And so I'm sure that Will Johnson, and again, will probably love me as much as Mayor Jacobs' IT folks, but Mr. Johnson has got that down very well. We have long public forum sessions, so be prepared, but I'm sure that can happen very easily.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion on our motion?
Yes, thank you for bearing with me. So finding that balance between, obviously our concern, we want people to have a voice. We want to be transparent, but we also want to keep our citizens safe. We want to keep ourselves safe. I would like for us to consider also not only limiting the total amount of time, but perhaps what do you all think? What are your thoughts on limiting speakers? So we have 2 to 5 people pro, 2 to 5 people anti for whatever the issue is. Just a thought. Just because we've got to get our work. We have to make decisions based on the data, and also, of course, we want to honor people's desire to speak their minds. But we can't let our meeting be railroaded. And we've talked about that. Dr. O'Brien and Dr. Gotcher, I think, have mentioned that we still have to do our work. So what about not only limiting in time, but maybe number of speakers representing each side? Just thinking out loud.
I think you could limit the total number of speakers, but unfortunately, not everybody might be necessarily transparent when they are talking about, when they fill out whatever subject they want to talk about. So I think the best bet would be to limit the time and the total number of speakers.
Any other discussion on our motion? If not, if we're ready to vote, Narda will go with a roll call vote on this.
Okay. Drake,
Yes.
Gotcher,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
Yes.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Souza,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you. All passed.
Dr. Gocher, could I ask, just it's a point of order, just a follow-up question?
You may.
So now that we've been through that, the Mayor Jacobs had mentioned I believe an in-person meeting on Monday at 5. And so I wasn't really sure at that point, the relative, I know that's a different situation that's about, but the need.
That meeting is closed to the public.
That's closed to the public and needs to be in person.
That's an executive session meeting, so there will not be public minutes on that, with my understanding of executive session. Mr. Morton, is that correct?
That's correct. We'll be talking about the lawsuit, legal advice. I'm sorry, did you hear that? We'll be talking about the lawsuit, attorney-client communications next Monday.
Dr. Shamia, that answer your question?
It does, yes.
Great, okay. So next item on the agenda, which I've got is 4 on my record that I'm looking at here, is COVID-19 face covering regulation 2020-01, a review and discussion. And there are A, B, and C. Is there any general discussion on that before we go through A, B, and C on the agenda? If not, we'll start with A, which is city enforcement report.
Hey, good evening. It's David Brace, and appreciate your time. I'm actually the COO and Deputy to Mayor India Kincannon. I talked with Mr. Neese, who is my colleague at the county, regarding this report. And since we're a supporting agency, if the board allows, and Dr. Gocher, if you're fine with this, I think it would be good if Ronnie, Mr. Neese, excuse me, started first, and then I can dovetail into the report after his report, if that's okay with the board.
So if that's okay with everybody, what we'll do is we'll do B first and A second, if everybody's all right with that. I sense there's no problem with that. Mr. Neese?
Wait a second. Yeah, now.
Sorry, caught him by surprise.
Yeah. Where's the video? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, this is Ronnie Neese. I'm the Director of Environmental Health for the Knox County Health Department. And I will say to start with that the city of Knoxville has been a great partner in all of our enforcement issues since this COVID-19 incident has occurred. How we are handling all of the complaints that come in to 311 and to the health department is that 311 will send us all of the complaints that they get concerning facilities that we permit here at the health department, which would be restaurants, daycares, convenience stores, grocery stores, hotels, those things that we are regulatory for the state that we look over. They send those to us. Any businesses that are in Knox County, we also are involved in contacting them. Any businesses that are within the city of Knoxville, the city of Knoxville staff is handling those compliance issues. And what we are doing as part of the compliance is that when we get a concern, our environmental staff reaches out to the facility either by a telephone call or a visit, depending on the number of times that we've had a complaint against that facility. And we try to educate them about the mask mandate. We also provide them with the signage that they are required to have, and we offer them masks if they would take those. Another part that we're doing in environmental health is part of their routine inspection process on a daily basis. They are also taking with them the education and the guidance information to provide to all facilities that they're inspecting in that day. They also will give them signage that they need and also provide masks if they desire to have additional masks. So that is part of what we're doing. And just to give you a few figures, since July the 4th, we've had a total at the health department, 444 complaints. 247 of those have been with permitted facilities and 197 have been against businesses. The first week, starting with July the 4th, we had 226 complaints total. And then last week, it was down to 80 complaints. And looking at the data before our meeting today, we've had 38 this week, and that gets through today. So there has been a downward trend in the amount of complaints that are being issued or given to us. And the issue that we always hear on the complaints is they're not wearing masks, not all folks are wearing masks, and they're not practicing social distancing. That's the two things that are predominantly what of all of our complaints are. Mr. Brace has the city of what they're doing, so I'm going to defer back to him to let him tell you what the city is doing.
Thank you, Mr. Neese, and let me echo his thoughts about the collaboration. We've worked together for a long time, and so this is not the first time that we've collaborated on public health and safety enforcement. Let me just say too, it's a progressive model. So we're out every day, really educating and providing resources to businesses to be successful. And so again, we, just like the health department and Mr. Neese's team, we go out and do everything we can to provide masks, to provide education and signage, and the compliance has been good. I think most individuals, especially since the mask mandate, thank you, that made an absolutely, it was a critical step for compliance, and the leadership of that compliance down from the top down has made a difference. So we've seen a tapering off of calls as well. I think most of our residents contact the health department first, although 311 is a good conduit, not only for complaints about enforcement, but general information about COVID. About 10% of our calls are COVID now, and we try to connect people with resources. So out of about 13,000 calls into our 311/211 system, the city runs both. About 10% of those are COVID related, and connecting people to either information, providing that information, or connecting them into the various systems that support their needs. So we about 140 complaints that are again complaints that we're supporting the health department with: education, the progressive model, and enforcement. And those are, again, mostly retail establishments that are the two big concerns are lack of social distancing and lack of wearing masks. We did have some discussion. Oftentimes the individuals that are in the field ask about we haven't had to do this, what happens if, because those details matter. And so we have talked with our law department that should there be a need for a citation, our attorney, city attorney, Mr. Swanson, felt that it would be best to bring those cases individually back to you as a health board to present those facts and to request that a citation be issued. Does not have to happen yet, but I think be prepared that if that comes into the future for a future meeting, that would be something that potentially could be on the agenda. Again, education and progressive enforcement is really the goal with any enforcement in the field. I guess, Mr. Neese, what else have we missed? A few trouble spots, I think, on the city's end that we continue to see problems are, again, evening alcohol consumption in bars. That has been a real challenge for us. You may have received similar emails about that. And so we'll continue to support Mr. Neese and his activities on the enforcement end, but that has been a trouble spot. So I think we'll open it up for questions, and we appreciate your service and your time tonight.
Hey, this is Myers Morton. I have to jump in. There's absolutely no legal authority for this Board of Health to be involved in any citations for any criminal sanctions. The only authority for that is the law enforcement, and then they have prosecutors for that and judges. So to suggest that this Board of Health is going to be involved in writing citations is legally not even close to right. Okay.
Okay. But Mr. Martins, I guess this is David Brace. I think you and Mr. Swanson can talk about it. He felt that if we had that situation, we should bring that to this board to authorize the city to issue a citation. But I'll let the lawyers work that out. And you can give a call to Mr. Swanson.
Any questions from the board to Mr. Neese or Mr. Brace on their report?
So I just have one, and this is just because you're both involved with the people on the front lines of addressing this. And I've mentioned this in prior meetings, so this won't be brand new, but I've never been totally at peace with there was the idea that if you're indoors and you can ensure that, and by the way, let me preface this with saying that the mask wearing I've observed has really been really impressive. So but the idea that if you're inside and you're sure you're 6 feet distance, you don't need to be with a mask. And the reality is that you just randomly you're close to somebody and then you're not distanced and all that. And so I guess my question is that do you see in the people you're interacting with or the organizations you're interacting with that people are using that 6 foot inside as a reason to not wear a mask? Because masks are the workhorse for me, scientifically and clinically, not they're more important than the 6 feet of distance, I guess.
This is Ronnie with the health department. What we're seeing is that it's not the 6 foot distance. The ones that are not wearing masks are just not wearing them. They're still up very close to people and interacting on the close associations, but it's the ones that don't have them, that's what's going on. Otherwise, most folks are wearing masks. I agree with you that the mask wearing has really increased, and our staff is seeing that out in the field. They're seeing folks that are doing really good jobs of the facilities wearing masks, the staff, and all of their patrons. So it has increased, but that is the issue of just people are not wearing them.
Yeah, I would echo that I actually think mask compliance since the order was in place has significantly increased. And folks that don't have masks, I think part of that is the education piece. And we have found with our folks in the field that when they talk to the businesses, and again, we're there to provide masks. There's thousands of masks in this community that we can hand out and assist businesses and assist residents who may not either be aware of or have a mask. So, but the compliance has gone up significantly, but it hasn't had any direct connection with the 6 foot distancing. It's just not wearing a mask.
And this is just a comment. I think it's important to note that a number of retailers, especially major nationwide retailers, are now mandating masks. And even here in the region, Food City, and others, and they're pretty serious about it. You go, when I've gone into those stores, their staff and everybody else is wearing. So it's not just the government action, but it's also the private sector stepping up.
I think what you're looking at is the marketplace exerting itself, and they're going to grab greater market share if they require it than if they did not require it. Other points of discussion? If not, Mr. Brace, Mr. Neese, thanks very much for your report. Point C is something that I thought would be nice to bring up. This is coming out of a letter that we all got. And it was one of a few that wasn't polarizing. Somebody had contacted us about the idea of rewarding people, maybe randomly, maybe not, for wearing a mask. And it's sort of like being pulled over by a policeman, getting an attaboy or a gift certificate or something if you're doing the right thing. And it's a public-private partnership, and it's something that, to my way of thinking, has absolutely no downside, and it would really be something, if we promoted, that might encourage mask wearing even more. Did everybody get a chance to read over that? I mean, we had this flurry of letters, but in those letters, there was one that I thought sort of stood out and maybe bore some discussing. Anybody else read it?
Dr. Gocher, I did. And I guess in the practical application of that, one of the ideas that I haven't talked to Ronnie about is, if they're doing well, they got a certificate when they signed up for the listserv, can we give them a, good job as a business for requiring masks? That to encourage, if that would encourage more businesses to do it, that I'm not opposed to that. I think logistics of giving a citizen a pat on the back, I'm not sure how that would work.
Well, either a citizen or a business, or maybe somehow I would leave that to marketing or leave it to private enterprise, but it seemed to me that something that at least could be encouraged. I think it's kind of a win-win situation, because the public is getting positive feedback, or the businesses are, and the mask compliance may go up a little bit as a result of it. I don't know that it needs any action. It was just for information. I think we all received it. Any comments on that? And any folks in the business community that happen to be listening, if you can figure out a way to incorporate that to everyone's benefit, we'd be very, very grateful. Mayor, any thoughts on that as a way that private enterprise could kind of help us out?
I actually did not see that email, sir. If you forward it to me, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's you know, it's rewarding people for good behavior. I thought it was pretty good. Okay. Next is our UTMCK data update report, Dr. Shemaya.
And so this was just Dr. Buchanan, there had been a kind of a natural flow of your report, I think, leading up into mine that I thought worked well. I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other, but do you want to change?
I can kick it off, no
Okay.
problem.
I think that just to keep it consistent for us, that was my only intent.
Sure. So Kelsey, okay. Kelsey's going to pull up the website for everybody. So while she's doing that, I'll just kind of review the situation, kind of a situational review for everybody. We currently have 3,533 cases of COVID in Knox County. We have 148 probable cases. 1,539 of our cases have recovered, giving us 1,967 active cases. 186 individuals have been hospitalized at some point in their illness. Currently, there are 38 Knox County residents hospitalized, so that's just Knox County. And sadly, we reported another death due to COVID, bringing our total to 27. Can you make that bigger? Because it's really small. Okay.
Oh,
okay. We're working on making that bigger because on my screen, the view of Kelsey's laptop is really small. So the first benchmark, sustained reduction or stability in new cases for 14 days. This benchmark remains at red because we continue to have red flags and significant continuous increase in the volume of new cases. Certainly continues to be a cause for concern in this trend. And as we've discussed, reiterates the need to continually practice the 5 core principles and reminds us that COVID-19 is very much still active in our community. We had hoped to see some changes based on the mask mandate, although we really aren't seeing much of a trend down yet. We're still just about 4 weeks out from that. Again, probably a couple of incubation periods before we can see evidence of anything we put in place. We'll continue to watch this, but haven't seen a leveling off or downward trend to this point. Second benchmark, community-wide sustained and increased diagnostic testing with consistent or decreased test result reporting turnaround time. From the data that we can see, the trends are heading in the right direction for both of these. Number of tests conducting continues to go up. The lab lag time has gone down. So we're encouraged by this. We're keeping this benchmark at yellow because of the continued lack of stability with lab capacity that we are experiencing, and we know other partners in the community are experiencing as well. Third benchmark, sustained or increased public health capability. This benchmark continues to be at green. My staff amazes me every day, and they continue to be able to reach out to our cases within 24 hours and their contacts within 48 hours. That doesn't mean we talk to all of them, but we make an attempt to reach out to them in that time frame. And we do eventually talk to all of them. And then for the fourth benchmark, the healthcare system capabilities remain within current and forecasted surge capacity. This is a benchmark that we collaborate with our hospital partners, and Dr. Shemia will talk more specifically about hospital data here in a minute. But as you can see, ICU beds and ventilator use for COVID-19 continue to go up slightly, although capacity remains in pretty good shape. If you scroll on down, Kelsey, where you can see the so for that reason, we are leaving this at yellow. The upward trends are concerning, but we also see that capacity is actually better than it was last week. Excuse me, overall. And for our fifth benchmark, sustained or decreased COVID-19 related death rate for identified positive or probable cases. Unfortunately, this benchmark continues to be represented as red because you continue to see statistically significant increases in deaths over the past 14 days. So that's another one of our concerning trends. As our as our cases have increased, we've also seen an increase in our deaths due to COVID. Any questions about the benchmarks?
Dr. Buchanan, I have a question, please.
Yes, sir.
At your press conference today, you talked about false positives. And could you please explain what's happening with the testing?
I'm gonna let Charity speak to that. She's in the room with me since she did the press briefing today.
Thank you.
Oh, I unmuted. I hit.
Sorry, supposed to do my video. Sorry about that. What we talked about today, we had a question about those, and we were asked how we handle false positives, and the guidance that we've received from Tennessee Department of Health, that I believe CDC is following as well, is if we have two disparate tests, so a positive and a negative, we still treat it like a positive. So because there's no way to know which one is the correct test. It is not happening very often, but we have had a few cases of that. I can probably think of less than 10 times out of all of our cases that I know of that happening. We can try to look at the data. But if it's, we still interview them, they get put in isolation and everything the same, because again, there's no way to know which test was inaccurate. So to err on the side of caution, the guidance we've received is to treat it as a case. Again, very few of those. But.
Thanks, Charity.
Yep.
Dr. Buchanan, I'd like to ask a few questions about what I've spoken about before is on 2 and 3 combined. And so our turnaround time and then our contact tracing. And I'm going to kind of park here for a few minutes just because of my concerns about this. So anecdotally, what I'm seeing is that people are reaching out really who've been a contact of a case, or sometimes they're a contact of a contact. And invariably, it's been several days that index person has waited until they got their positive result. And I have multiple concerns about kind of this issue. What I know is that when we talk about mitigation and controlling this, the masks seem to get not just here, but in a lot of places, a lot of the attention. But the countries who've really been able to do this well have had very short turnaround times and have really handled quarantine well. And because of a turnaround time, and you got to understand, even we would all be jumping up and down if we had a widespread 48-hour turnaround time. But the only way you can manage a 48-hour, only way that's even acceptable is if people are truly quarantining appropriately. And so these are my concerns, and then I'd welcome your response, because none of this has to do with anybody not doing the best they can. I mean, the turnaround time is what it is. At the rate that cases are going up, you're adding people as fast as you can. But I think that one concern is that a lot of contact tracing and contact evaluation, I think some of the public has taken in their own hands, because again, the health department's not gotten involved because that index case hasn't even resulted yet. And so there's, I think, a big misperception that when someone thinks they've been a contact of a potential case, they go out and get a test, and then they go about their business, and then their test comes back. And then if their test negative, they think they're free and clear. When in fact, if you're a true contact, the whole point of doing that test is to see if there's another circle of contacts. It's not that it doesn't shorten the quarantine period, I guess. And I think that's widely misunderstood. And so I don't know how, I know that there's been every attempt to educate that, but I just don't think it's understood. And my other concern, quite frankly, is that I think last week you reported 160 something contact investigation folks. And I believe the number is 205. And just trying to talk a few people through that myself, I mean, that's a fairly complicated, nuanced thing. And you're onboarding people very quickly. I don't know what the training is, but this process is only as good as the turnaround time, and only as good as the comfort level that those people have. And so at the end of the day, what matters when it comes to this piece is results, meaning the outcome. Are we really being effective with what we're trying to do? And I worry that in turnaround time and public health capacity are so linked that, and they're so important for this overall response that I'm uncomfortable that it's going faster than we're able to keep up with it. And so I don't mean to press, but I'd like comments about your thoughts on that.
I'll comment first, and I think Charity will chime in as well. So first of all, when you talk about people getting tested and going about their business, we are continuing to recommend, and unfortunately our physicians in the community are not doing the same thing, that if you get tested for COVID-19, you isolate until you get the test results back. That helps reduce all those contacts and all that other stuff. I don't know how to get physicians in the community who are testing to share that same message, because they are not sharing that message. And I'm not just blaming them, but they're the ones that are doing the other testing. And we are consistent recommendation is that if you get tested, you need to isolate. It doesn't matter if you have symptoms or not. You isolate until you get test results back. So that helps a little bit with the exposures that occur between testing and results. The contact to a contact thing and all the stuff people are doing happens with everything we investigate. And the public has a mind of their own and does what they think they need to do to protect themselves. So I don't know how to combat that, but Charity probably has some more insight because she's more directly involved in that than I am.
Yeah, and we don't disagree with you, Dr. Shamia, that the turnaround time poses real challenges for the contact tracing efforts. The longer that goes out, the harder it is. That has been a real concern. Again, a lot of our tests we're getting back very quickly and we're able to act on them very quickly. We have had our challenges. Obviously, this week we started with a new lab vendor, and we're seeing results coming back. Right now, the ones I saw today were back within 48 hours. So I think that's a good positive sign. And this is the reason we went with yellow today on that benchmark, is that lab capacity is so unstable, as you know, across the board right now. So, today this, Lab X is doing fine and getting stuff in and turned around in a timely manner, but it might be Lab Y that is starting to have issues and concerns. So, I mean, the short response to what you're saying is it is a challenge, and as the portion, as that time frame gets bigger, there's less impact that we can have. But on the other side, as the volume is going up, we are onboarding folks as quick as we can. We do have a really thorough training, and then we have redundancy put into place. There's layers for each team, and there's team leads that can help guide and answer questions, and that's what they're doing all day long. And we empower our investigators to utilize that, and they do. If there's any question on the guidance or anything of that nature. Another reason you see a big leap in the staffing, though, is also we're trying to get on board new staff so our staff can start rolling off to be able to do other work. As we know that other things are still happening in the community and need to be able to be addressed. And so that is a little bit of that, but they're still available and trained if we need them to pull them in at any point. But there are challenges. It's a very valid concern that we have. I mean, like Dr. B said, right now, when we get the lab in, we act on it immediately. But there are challenges with getting the labs in on time still.
So thank you. And I mean, the kind of two closing points I'll make on this, I appreciate both your answers. One is that I just don't want us as a board to lose sight that if we can't, at the rate we are now, if we can't get, the effectiveness of that piece is so vital. And the other thing, though, that made me bring it up or made me think about it is I did a little bit of back of the napkin math, and you start to think about how much testing is going on right now. And then you think about what one student who is COVID-19 positive, what that's going to create, not just within that classroom, but then it's the families, it's the contacts of the contacts. And so there's going to very quickly infuse into the system a whole nother layer of that contact investigation, testing, delayed turnaround time. That's going to get really complicated really fast. And I worry about as much as the schools have their opening plans, and I know that, and Ms. Wagner, you could speak to this. I know that, the opening plans are addressing a lot of those 5 core actions, but it's this other piece. It's that positive student. And then how does that all play out from there that I worry about for them just as much.
So we've been working with the health department, and I've been in the training class, me and someone else, on how to, contact trace and things like that. So we'll be working with the health department on that. So we'll have our own little database and everything that we keep up, and we get to speak to the other, the epi teams at the health department and things like that. So we've been kind of doing that all along right now. So sometimes I find out a case before the health department does, and I contact the health department. And those employees that are around that case, then we automatically put them in quarantine or whatever the case may be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
To add to that a little bit, just to kind of give the full picture, and I didn't mention something else you asked about, Dr. Shami, and I don't want to skip over one thing before I get to that, is absolutely we need to work on as a community. We talked about this today, and we've been putting it out more and more. You cannot test your way out of quarantine, and that 2-week period is there, and we need to make sure that everybody is very clear on that. The getting a test helps us to contact trace and get people, out of the population and do everything that we need to do if you get tested while you're in quarantine. But you don't get to get out of quarantine with a negative test based on the incubation period. So thank you for bringing that up, and that is a big message that we're trying to work with as well. With the schools and UT, for that matter, we're working on processes right now, and they're going to essentially have their own EPI teams that work with us and are fully integrated into our team. So they kind of, just like we have our EPI response teams that work every day, they're going to have their teams as well. So there will be very close communications with both Knox County schools and the University of Tennessee to help with contact tracing on campuses with the staff and the students. And then all of that reported back to us for our data and measures, and so that we can let you know what we're seeing within the community and make sure proper monitoring is being done and all of those things. So that's happening in the background as well to help, because we do know that's going to be, you hit it spot on, Dr. Shamiya, that those contacts within the schools and then their home and all of those things, we know that's going to rapidly have the potential to rapidly grow.
And I just want to say for anybody listening, that you can't test your way out of quarantine is catchy. And I think it's important that that gets conveyed as much as we can. The quarantine is a period of time, and the test doesn't shorten that.
Thanks for several good comments. Any other discussion on the benchmark presentation? If not, Dr. Shamiya, would you continue with UTMCK's data update, please?
Sure. So if is somebody going to drive those slides for me like we did last week?
It should be up right now. Can you see it?
There it is.
Yeah, if you can kind of turn it into just turn it into presentation mode, and we'll be in good shape. There you go. So just as same format, I've added a few things that are new because they're pertinent. I'll call it out if it's specifically UT Medical Center data, if that's the only thing I could get. Otherwise, it's going to be either Knox County or that THA district data. So next slide, please. So this is our age demographics of UT Medical Center. Again, the people on the left are all those positives that we've sent as tests. On the right are our hospitalizations updated since last week. And very similar, the point I always emphasize is the age distribution of hospitalization continues to be across several decades. And remember, a lot of COVID-19 patients are managed at home. So these are all people who were sick enough to require admission to the hospital. Next slide, please. So we also look at this. On the left is Knox County, and on the right is that THA Knoxville district. I've got those counties listed on a later slide. But the correlation kind of continues. If you remember on Knox County, I told you that I thought that the round circles were going to wrap upward again, and it appears that they are. But 45 new hospitalizations for every 1,000 new cases. And then in the district, 48 new hospitalizations for every 1,000 new cases. Remember that even if the new hospitalizations drop a bit at the rate we're diagnosing new cases, it still translates to more total hospitalizations. Next slide, please. So this is pretty early, guys, but because we had taken a look at it, I wanted to share it with you. And so this is, I would not think that Charity or Dr. Buchanan would have any sense of this, but there is some preliminary evidence that the mask resolution is effective. And so what this does is it looks at our doubling day rate, which is simply the number of days it takes for the number of new diagnoses to double, and the average of that. So the average, the orange line, simply smooths out the blue line. And so the analogy I want to give here, though, is that this is, so think of it this way. If a car is going 60 miles an hour and you've got your foot on the accelerator and it's accelerating to 80 and then it's accelerating to 100 and then it's in cruise control at 100. What this graph is showing is that we're basically going, if we got up to 100 miles per hour, we're still going 100 miles per hour. It's just that we're not pushing our foot on the accelerator. And so that flattening doesn't represent that things are better. It means that we've slowed the rate of things getting worse. But I also do see that this is evidence, at least preliminary evidence, that it did something. And my encouragement to everyone is to keep it up. I did show on the right-hand side, just in terms of, remember, from a hospital perspective, we don't check somebody's county of residence when they check into the hospital. So this is that THA district, and it just shows you where there's a mask resolution and where there's not. And so next slide, please. So with that being said, where even with some blunting of that, we're still accelerating. This is what shows that. I've compared us to put us in context with some other counties. You see the rate of new cases in Knox and in Blount and in Hamblin. Hamilton is settled down a bit. Remember, the other parts of the state were far ahead of us. They started earlier, so those absolute numbers are higher. But I'm looking more at the kind of the rate of new cases. And look at Davidson. Davidson in the center of the state has dropped off significantly, and Shelby has had some of that as well. But Knox, you see, we're continuing on the upslide. Next slide, please. So then back to really looking at the pace of new cases and building to hospitalizations. The Knoxville district, so Knox County, again, it took us just 9 days to get to that next 1,000, right? Just to level set that's 113 days to get to the first 1,000 cases, 15 days for the next 1,000, 9 days for the first 1,000. And then for the district of counties, it's going even faster than that. Next slide, please. So new cases by week and month. So I'll look to the right-hand side for Knox County. You see that as of the 28th of July, we had 2,370 cases compared to 588 in June. For the district that the hospitals are largely serving, 5,600 in July compared to 1,447 in June. Next slide, please. So this is hospitalizations. We've sensed that there's a data lag to some extent in some of these, meaning that they don't get assigned to necessarily the county by the Tennessee Department of Health immediately. But Knox is gone from 96 hospitalizations in July compared to 30 in June. The district 230 in July compared to 77 in June. Next slide, please. And then this is kind of where we've traditionally wrapped up. So this is on the lower right-hand side are those counties that are part of what's defined as the THA Knoxville district. And I'll show on the next slide some dates where hospitals didn't report, but we've continued to see that increase to a census of 180 patients in the hospital at the same time across the district. Next slide, please. So this simply explains why it can be not a smooth line. I mean, just as an aside, there's a tremendous reporting requirement for hospitals reporting to the state, reporting some things to the federal government, reporting other places. And so if a hospital or a few hospitals misses reporting data, then it simply shows a jagged line. And those are all places. And even a data entry error, we had a 2 instead of a 20, and then was corrected to a 20. And so, so that does have an impact. Next slide, please. So this is that same projection. And I always emphasize that this is not anything really super sophisticated. It simply takes the trend that we've been on and projects it out to September the 9th. And to show everything we've done up to now, so that shows 380 projected, we don't know precisely, but projected that district and all the health systems could share 387 patients at the same time on September the 9th. And the next slide, please. And so what this does is it just, the blue is what we showed on July the 15th. The orange is July the 22nd. And the green is July the 29th. And you'll notice that the green and the orange are incredibly on top of each other and even close to the original line. So the further out we go, the more, unfortunately, confident that we'll be in this projection as we continue to increase. Now, I will say, back to the point about the mask, we would have expected that if there had been no blunting, meaning that we took our foot off the accelerator, that 387, that line would be even further up to the left. It would be even higher. And so the question I get asked related to hospital capacity is, well, at what point do the hospitals have issues? And I will tell you universally, and I've mentioned this before, the biggest concern the health systems have is about staffing. And so we've had the visit from the federal government, and I think just a few days ago, the state was here and that was expressed to them. And there had been mentioned some options about things like traveling staff and traveling nurses. But I've mentioned that a lot of different cities are running into this issue at the same time. And so there's not yet the confidence that there's a lot of staff to be delivered. All the hospitals have some surge capacity. They all can surge. They can all staff extra beds to a certain extent, but there's a little bit of, or more than a little bit of uncertainty about where that staff is going to come from. And so I believe that's, next slide, please. I think that was, so this I've shown you before, but it's just, this is back to being just UT Medical Center. And these are the deaths that we have had. And so, I mean, first of all, without having to read the lines, you see what has happened in July compared to everything up until July. And then just as you scan the ages and the presentations, there still is a significant age range represented by these COVID-19 deaths at UT Medical Center. Next slide. And I bring this up, and I do believe this is my final slide, is that we had an experience at our hospital over the weekend where we had seen our COVID census drop between one day to the next. And then a few hours later, once we got more information, it dawned on us that that drop had been related to it doesn't happen every day, but we had deaths over that 24-hour period. And so I just bring this up because I want to superimpose the green line is the line I've already shown you. And then the black line is the number of deaths that the district has had. And so the idea behind this, unfortunately, is that if we weren't having that many people pass away, then the hospital census would likely be even more challenging. And then the other thing that we're keeping a very close eye on is the post-acute care setting. So rehabs and skilled nursing facilities, because they have a lot of restrictions that they're working with. And they also have staff issues and perhaps staff that's diagnosed with COVID. And if the hospitals can't transition patients to post-acute care like they normally would be able to do, because the post-acute care is having capacity issues, then that in turn can lead to capacity issues in the hospitals. Hospitals are continuing to collaborate. We have a daily capacity call where we ensure that everybody is in okay shape. as far as bed status, and it's been incredibly collaborative and will continue to be that way. And so I believe that's, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Dr. Gocher, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that report, Dr. Shamia. The next item on our agenda is the CRAFT report, which is the Coronavirus Response Assistance Field Team. That was the federal visit to Knoxville in early July. And Dr. Buchanan, do you have the information on that for us?
You all were all sent a copy of that report, and I'm not sure if I have it in front of me or not. Honestly. Basically, CDC, TEMA, and ASPR, which I can't remember what that stands for. Assistant Secretary
of Preparedness
and Response
for HHS.
For HHS. So representatives from those three federal organizations came to visit Knox County, and there we go. There it is. Thank you, Kelsey. It's in front of us now. And so they met with my staff. They met with both the city and the county mayor. They met with hospital representatives. They also, I believe, met with members of the faith community and the EOC, KEMA. And they came because they're visiting places where cases have been increasing at a higher rate than they had been. So they went to 12 or 13 different places across the country. And we happened to be one of them. Mostly it was a listening exercise. They really wanted to hear from us what our concerns were, what our worries were, and how they might be able to help us. We've already received some resources from them. One of our challenges is as we have more cases, and we have cases in communities with whose first language is not English, we have limited resources for helping them. We also talked to them, and Dr. Shmee was not there. Dr. Shmee was there. Okay, he can speak to what the hospitals expressed as their concerns as well. We also talked about our concerns about lab. Everybody expressed concerns about lab turnaround time, lab capacity, and being able to really have consistent lab turnaround time and increasing lab capacity across the country. One of the things they recommended that we do that we were not already doing was begin a community recovery group,
yes,
which we've convened. We've already started convening some folks around that. So the idea is when you have a natural disaster, any other kind of disaster, you start planning for recovery. Usually they're shorter lived than a pandemic. So it's more about, a lot of times it's more about rebuilding businesses and rebuilding homes. And how do you do that? Does it look the same as it did before? Does it look different? So this is a little bit different than that, but talking about how can we support our community to recover from COVID-19, and will our community look different after COVID-19 than it does now? And so I think we're pulling in other groups. Charity, you were in that meeting, I wasn't.
So we met originally to start off with the folks from the Knox County Emergency Management Agency to talk about what that would look like, and got some ideas together and the next steps to reach out to the mayor's offices and then get the full group up and running. A lot of the recovery stuff's already happening in a lot of ways, given that we have the social services group working through the Emergency Operations Center. But there's some other, the economic side, and there's the other work that needs to be done. And so I believe we and Colin Nickus from the Emergency Management Agency will be reaching out to keep that moving, but it's on its way.
And Kelsey, can you scroll down on to the next couple pages just to make sure I didn't miss any of the highlights, because I could not find, excuse me. At the time we were waiting on some funding from the state, which we are now receiving that money to help with testing and some of the things that we're doing. Excuse me, that took longer than we thought it should to get that money. So we're happy that we're getting that money. It does have some limitations. We're working on trying to address those limitations. You can't use it to pay for testing for insured patients. So we're looking for some different options. One of which is actually to direct bill the state for testing. Hamilton County's doing that, so we're trying to be able to do that as well. So, and then the hospitals talked about staffing. And Dr. Shamia, if you want to say anything about your thoughts on this meeting and if there's anything you want to bring up. And remdesivir was another thing that you guys talked about.
Yes. So I would echo what you said. I mean, I think our most significant point with those folks was to talk about staffing concern and what we might be able to find, what help we might be able to receive if the surge came to the point that we were having difficulty. I think another big theme was that, and you've addressed it, is that the community-wide testing situation is not necessarily something the community itself can solve. And so the desire to have outside assistance with that. And then the remdesivir, we have the antiviral medication that's being allocated to each hospital. And just the concern is, will there be enough of that going forward for all the patients who need it?
And Mayor Jacobs, you were also part of those meetings. I don't know if you have any comments on.
I think you covered everything pretty well, Dr. Lee. As you said, I think the thing that struck me the most was just, talking with the FEMA people about the working group, and when we're looking at recovery going forward and how to accomplish that, working with the community and nonprofits and private businesses as well.
Any other discussion or questions on the craft report? If not, thanks everybody for the input on that. Next is the article that was brought forth by the Center for Public Integrity in mid-July. Exclusive White House document shows 18 states in coronavirus red zone. And Dr. Buchanan, do you have information on that? Are you our go-to person for that portion of the agenda? Thank you.
You actually all also have an updated version of the White House Corona Task Force summary that was sent to the governor. It's dated 7/26/2020. And Knox County continues to be yellow, and in their recommendations for regions that are yellow, the state as a whole is red, but we are yellow according to this. Mask wearing is and we're already doing that. Limit social gatherings to 25 people or fewer. Currently we're at 50. Do not go to bars or nightclubs. It contradicts itself a little bit because it does say in one place, if you're red or yellow, you should close bars and nightclubs, but then in the outlined recommendations, it just says don't go. Use takeout and outdoor dining, or indoor dining with strict social distancing. We're doing a lot of that. Reduce public interactions and activities. So that's the public messaging for officials. Recommendations to limit gyms to 25%. We're currently at gyms are allowed to open as long as they can maintain social distancing under current guidelines. Close bars until percent positive. Oh, they do say close bars. I'm sorry. I apologize. I read the wrong one. Close bars until percent positive rates are under 3%. Create outdoor dining opportunities with pedestrian areas. Limit social gatherings to 25 or fewer. Routine weekly testing of all workers. We're doing that already. We're also prohibiting visitors. Kelsey, if you go on down, the pages aren't numbered, unfortunately. But here we are, policy recommendations, counties in yellow zone. Increased messaging for those at risk, for individuals in all age groups to shelter in place, so limit their activities. Work with local community groups to provide targeted, tailored messaging to communities at with high case rates, and increase community level testing. We're working really hard to do that. We continue to be challenged by that, by getting into those communities that where we have increased cases and maybe not seeing, partly because of the lag time, not seeing it soon enough. So by the time we're able to engage with the community and we're aware of what's going on, cases have gone up. So it's a concern of ours, and it is related back to laboratory lag time and when we learn about things. We are recruiting contact tracers and continue to try to do that. We are not currently individually testing all household members. Part of that's a resource issue as we continue to talk about testing challenges. Increasing testing volume adds to our lag time. So we have taken the approach of household members are being quarantined. If they get symptomatic, they're a case. I realize that means we're missing some asymptomatic cases potentially, but we are quarantining those household members, and they're being contacted every day to make sure they're staying in quarantine. Provide isolation facilities outside of households if COVID positive individuals can't quarantine successfully. That's a resource challenge. Being able to provide housing for people outside their home also means you have to provide for their food and other needs. So we have not utilized that unless we've really had to. We are helping with housing for folks who are at risk for losing their home because they can't work. We have an EOC group, which is helping obtain food for people who are in quarantine or isolation because they don't have the money to get the food or they can't go out to get the food.
And they're actually first step to help with housing, and then we will if
Right,
that
so
doesn't
they're
work out.
yeah, they're the first stop for housing, and then if they can't find something, then we try to help with that. But that's a real challenge. One of our challenges here locally, and we've talked about it, is the challenge of the homeless folks, and then folks who are just one paycheck away from homelessness and trying to support them. And now as the federal support as everything changes and people aren't going to get rent forgiveness or mortgage forgiveness or whatever it was called, we're worried about seeing an increase in that. And then under testing, move to community-led neighborhood testing and work with local community groups to increase access to testing. We are doing some of that, but part of the challenge with that is resources. A community group has to have a relationship with a lab to be able to do testing. So we have to stay involved or get one of our partners like UT to be involved, or somebody else, a medical provider who has a relationship with a lab to be able to do community level testing. But we are working with community groups to do our search events are in concert with community groups. But one of the challenges is just logistical. You have to have a relationship to a lab to do testing. Search test, okay. And then so they talk about diagnostic and surveillance pooling of samples. The diagnostic pooling is really a laboratory decision. If they decide to start pooling samples that they get from us and run like 5 people at a time, if that group is positive, they go back, they don't use all the materials, they go back and test those individually. So if they're negative, then they're done. They don't test any more of those. So they run one test and say 5 people are negative. But with our positivity rate, that's not a real practical thing for them to do. The positivity rate needs to be lower for that to be useful for the lab. Because now at our positivity rate, even with pooling, most of those folks are going to have to get tested anyway. So you're actually increasing your testing volume. Surveillance pooling, UT will be doing some of this when students come back. We've talked some about doing it. Again, we'd have to coordinate with our lab to be amenable to accepting pooled specimens. That would be where you'd have a family and you swab everybody individually, put it in one tube and send it to the lab. If that comes back negative, you're good, the family's clear. If that comes back positive, you have to test the individuals, determine who is the case. So we have not been doing that. Part of it is the lab coordination. Part of it is we just haven't moved to that. Yeah, we've looked at it. So, and then there's a lot of data. It looks similar to the data that we look at. That's one thing that they said when they looked at our data and our website, they were pleased to see that our data looked like their data, even though the data is not good. The data was similar and it wasn't, we were sharing the same data with our community as they're seeing at the federal level. So any questions, concerns about that?
Questions from the board? If not, Dr. Buchanan, thank you very much for that. So the next item is local bars review and discussion of possible action.
This is Maria Hurt. Is it Danielle or someone else who's going to pull up the document I sent you just before the meeting began? So I want to share that after reading the White House Task Force report and recommendations that occurred at the beginning of the month, and then the most recent with Dr. Birx, who's the representative for the White House Coronavirus Task Force, coming to Tennessee, and once again noting and identifying us as a red spot. And after reading the recommendations from each of those instances, what I would like to do is, after having worked with someone to draft this regulation, I would like an opportunity to present it to you all, give us time to read it and discuss it and take possible action. In a nutshell, it addresses the issue that is, I believe, based on science and looking historically, short-term history and long-term history of what's happening is limiting risk points for spreading the virus, especially asymptomatically. So this proposes that we, until we get a handle and really begin to flatten the curve, that we close local bars. So I'd like to everyone to take a look, take some time, and I propose that we discuss it.
Dr. Hurt, would you like to offer this in the form of a motion?
Yes, I make a motion that this regulation addressing the closing of bars in Knox County be, it's on the agenda, that we take time to read it and discuss it and take possible action. Thank you.
So we have a motion. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So a motion and a second, and open for discussion.
Has our law department had an opportunity to review this proposed regulation?
This is Myers Morton. No, Mayor, I hadn't, and I'm only seeing half the first page of it.
We all need to see it and then maybe take 3 minutes or so and be able to see all of it.
I believe there's a way to split it onto 2 pages at the same time.
Yeah, this is Myers Morton. I don't need to repeat all the advice I've given you. The governor and the attorney general are the law. We advise you don't exceed what they do. I haven't read this. I don't know if it came from a lawyer, where it came from, but this is a policy decision that this board makes.
So as we were going through this, and maybe Mr. Morton or Mayor Jacobs, you might be able to help us with some definitions. What is the definition of a bar versus the definition of a restaurant, and how are they distinguished?
There are different statutory definitions of each in the Tennessee Code annotated, which are not in front of me.
And I'll bring up having some knowledge of that business. There are bars, there are limited service restaurants, there are craft breweries. We would need to be very specific in what is considered a bar. I think that's very important, all this. You know, what are we trying to really do, and where are we seeing issues in the community? I think, you know, if we look at something like this, and I've had a chance to read all of it, is that we need to think about where do people congregate or will congregate, especially when they get back, i.e. college students, that could be issues for us. So that may be more what we're trying to accomplish. And I guess take the time to read this, but I just want to bring that up, that there are a number of varieties of entities.
I would agree, and I would direct your attention to the third point under the now therefore. The word bar is used in this regulation. I can't highlight from my screen because I'm not sharing it, but it goes on to further define that. And you touch on something, Dr. O'Brien, that I think is very important, that by proposing this, my hope is that we all discuss it. Things do not have to be, I mean, we can amend this, we can modify it to better reflect what we believe as a board or the needs of our community. So this is just a launching pad, so to speak, just as we modified Mayor Jacobs' proposal to, you know, not have this meeting or have an in-person public forum next week. And, you know, we found a compromise. We can certainly do that here. So this doesn't show all of, this is a 4-page document. There we go.
This is Myers Morton. I haven't been able to read it, very much of it all, but it looked like paragraph 8's illegal. Dr. Buchanan doesn't have those powers for this regulation. This board has made it made the last order on face mask where it has the status of state law, a criminal act, and only the law enforcement is entitled to enforce it. Like I said, I haven't been able to read this. It's very difficult to give you legal advice about this, but Dr. Buchanan or the Knox County Health Director can issue orders pursuant to directives, health directives, and it has nothing to do with this order this health board is thinking about. And it's apples and oranges, and it's inappropriate, I do believe, but I can't read it. It's not on my computer. I've only seen parts of it.
This is Dr. Shamia. I think it'd be fine just to park here until everyone feels that they've had the opportunity to read this as thoroughly as they desire, and then potentially move to the next page and do the same.
So question again, getting back to the definition of bar, and Dr. O'Brien, I appreciate your input in stating that facilities that serve alcoholic beverage fall under a whole variety of categories. And one thing that came to mind in reading some of the letters that we got today is that there are businesses that do have a certain portion of their business as serving alcoholic beverages. They do not have the facilities to produce food, but they have food trucks that come in. And in one case, I looked at their calendar, and every night they had, a different food truck or two that had come in. And so how does that figure into a certain percent of their income being due to food. It would be less than 50% because the food truck owners would be gathering that income. And yet, in a functional way, they would be functioning sort of as a restaurant that served alcohol. And it looks to me like that would be a way that somebody could accommodate the spirit of a regulation, but they would be bound by present rules, I guess you would say, and they would be an outlier. And that concerns me, I guess.
Yeah, one thing that would concern me is, I want to stand up for our business owners who are following our mask mandate, doing what they're supposed to be doing. Again, I'm getting more concerned about what's coming up next month with college students being here. I'm concerned with nightclubs, with places to gather and the numbers of people gathering versus somebody who goes to one of our 18 breweries here in our area where we have not found, thankfully to this point, that they have been a significant contributor to our COVID issues. It's not that I don't want to necessarily follow what we have from the White House report, but I would like us to maybe be more targeted and at least discuss, should we be instead talking about limiting the number of people in social gatherings from the 50 to 25 versus bars in general. And you're correct. If you mention that 50% or more revenues through alcoholic beverages, you're going to shut down pretty much all of our breweries here locally. And that's something that, again, I don't know that they're a part of a problem for us. And those are people who I have talked to and who I know. And I just think we need to consider that in all of this.
Can you meet me here? Oh, sorry, I'm looking at me. So this is Martha. So a couple things. One, the determining who generates 50% or more of their revenue through the sale of alcohol is something only the business knows or the regulator. We are not the regulator of bars. We don't issue the liquor licenses. Liquor licenses are issued by the state. Dr. O'Brien, am I correct? Liquor license from the state. I know we don't issue them.
No, it's if you have a liquor license, that is state. If you have a beer permit, is by the municipality or county government. So
Is that the beer board?
It goes before beer board, Farragut and City of Knoxville have beer boards. I assume the county may have one too.
County does. Yes, the county does.
So that's where that goes if you're just beer, involved with the sale of beer or production of beer.
So I know that's been a challenge in the past when that language has been used, talking about the percentage of sales is something hard for folks who are regulating to figure that out. It's not a reason not to do it, it's just one thought. And then, I know we've gotten lots of public input and we have to consider the economy, we have to consider the local economy and local business owners and all those things. But something we said earlier repeatedly was we really rely on the science. And where's the science for this? I know that I haven't really been able to find that. I heard that in Arizona, when they did a statewide closure of bars, they have since seen a reduction in their COVID-19 cases. We are starting to see some downward trends in Nashville and Davidson and Shelby County. Are those due to, I know Davidson did close bars. I'm not sure, and Shelby did too. So I guess where's the science? I know the science for this is very new. So where's the science? When bars were closed previously, I'll have to check. I don't know if we let, if we allowed food trucks to count as food and they could stay open. We did allow them to continue to serve beer for take home, so that somebody could come in and get a growler or a 6-pack and take it home, but they could not consume it on premise. So that was one way they were able to stay open and do that. They weren't able to stay open and have people inside, but people could take it home. So those are just my thoughts on this. That 50% or more is a challenge for us to regulate and us to know. It might need to involve, I don't know if it would need to involve the beer board to help us know who those entities are. I just don't know.
So Dr. Buchanan and board, I sent to the board a recent article that came out June 26 in Lancet Medicine. And I believe, and Dr. Shemay or others correct me if there's something else, but I think that probably represents the latest information with the highest evidence base about interventions that are non-pharmaceutical in COVID-19. And specifically, that article mentioned 3 interventions. One is mask wearing, and it divides this up. It's a huge number of studies in patients, but it divides it up into medical personnel and non-medical. So you have to concentrate on the non-medical side. There were 3 things. One is wearing a mask, and nothing really about bars or who serves things, but physical distancing. And the third was eye protection. And with physical distancing, there's a fair amount of information that social distancing as little as 1 meter had some effect, but 2 meters was better. And there was no data out there on 3 meters, but from a conceptual standpoint, that made sense. And wearing masks obviously was key. If we could outfit the public with N95s, which we can't, but if you could outfit the entire public with N95s, that would be the best. Cloth masks that had several layers were a very good substitute, and medical procedural masks were somewhere in between there. But that's the best available evidence, and it has to do with distancing, not specifically that somebody's consuming alcoholic beverages or that they're at a party or anything. It's just how far people are apart and whether they wear masks. And thirdly, I don't think this would penetrate the public very much, but whether they wear adequate eye protection.
So I'd like to kind of take a quick step back in terms of just putting this in context of what we've already talked about. And so we have passed a resolution related to mask. I think we've all said that we've seen an improvement in, or actually some really nice compliance with mask wear. And I even showed some very preliminary data that suggests that while it's not, it may be slowing the acceleration of what we've had, but it isn't turning this around. Then we've really came together to support the 5 core actions and the education around that, because I think we all believe, and again, as a Board of Health, we are focused on the health and well-being of the community, that we put as much as we could behind that. And there's been education around that. And every indication is that although there may be some progress, what we're doing and the pace of what is happening, and this is what I think the data shows us, is not enough. And then none of that modeling I showed you took into account either schools opening or the university opening. And so the concern I would present is that it's time to do something else. And then if you get back to those 5 core actions, and Dr. Buchanan, you talked about where's the science? Well, I mean, I think that if from what we know about COVID-19, I mean, I know of COVID-19 that got transmitted in a break room with 2 people eating lunch who had their mask off. And so the idea that this type of environment where it's hard to drink and have a mask on at the same time, it's hard to maintain social distancing, it may even be hard to maintain a certain capacity. I think those are issues. I just don't want us to, based on the data, overthink this. There's been in other cities examples of this type of environment leading to the spread of COVID, but it makes sense at this point. And I think the point was made about flattening the curve as quickly as we can. I will make the point that anything that we do can be undone as quickly as is reasonably possible. But if all of these things that are happening in the community related to COVID-19 are going to affect the economy, enough people get sick, enough people get quarantined, enough workplaces have a significant spread of COVID-19, all of those things will affect the economy. And then the other thing, just from a practical standpoint, I mean, there's a lot of other cities and municipalities that have done these type of things. I think the state of Kentucky, who I believe we're even ahead of as a state, did this just in the last few days. But the thing I've seen most commonly is the 50 or 51% of alcohol sales. I'm not sure how to, again, that's not my area of expertise, and there are others here that know more about that, but it's just the common way that seems to be done.
I'd like to tag on to that. Yes, this language has been used before, and perhaps Mr. Neese can comment on the specifics of how to define a bar. But before Mr. Neese, if you'd like to do that, before you do that, I'd like to call everyone's attention to the fourth clause here. It says we're going to proposal is to suspend in-house drinks right there. And then you can see here on the item 6 here, cannot be construed to prohibit food or drink for offsite. So this is trying to address the issue without incapacitating businesses. We are all painfully aware of how this pandemic and this virus is impacting us, our school systems, our economy, our psychological well-being. And I would like to take an opportunity to say for the members of the public who happen to be watching or will watch this, we are not elected officials, and we do not have a political agenda, because this virus doesn't care about anyone's political agenda. It just doesn't. It's going to do its job, which is to find human hosts to replicate itself and continue to live. And our job as the board, and the wonderful thing is people are working all over our great country and the world to try to stop the virus from getting and maintaining the upper hand. So, so that's what I'd like us to think about.
Something that I'd like to bring up, and I certainly sympathize with the spirit of this, but when governments prohibit things and they shut things down, they end up creating black and gray markets. Okay, and my fear is that if you just blanket shut bars down, like if the kids come back, they're just not going to go to bars. It doesn't mean they're going to stop partying in large groups in different places, but it will be at places we won't even know about. So unfortunately, what happens often when we try to use a blunt force to stop something is it's like trying to squeeze Jello, and it actually ends up in other places that we can't regulate at all.
While that may be true, Mayor, what the data shows from other cities that have used these approaches is that the Jello gets squeezed, but there are still enough people to follow the regulations and the recommendations to keep each other safe.
Sure. Have you been able to isolate any of these specific variables, though? When we're looking at the overall evidence, can we isolate what works and what doesn't? Just
so go ahead, Maria, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just, Mayor Jacobs, I always circle back to the basic act, the understanding of how the virus is transmitted. So if you throw 4 things at it and all 4 things make sense and you get an outcome, you get a result, and they all make medical clinical sense based on an understanding of how the virus gets into the air and is transmitted to another person, then trying to parse out specifically which one had what percentage of the effect I think it would be great. And maybe if we were on year 5 or 6 of dealing with COVID-19, we'd have that specific information. But there's no amount of science we could throw at this in this time frame that we've had to be able to precisely answer that question. And I think it gets back to, given where we are, I mean, this isn't our first go at this. I mean, we've been kind of looking at data, addressing this for several weeks. And so at some level, this also gets to, in the setting of the public health challenge we have, is it action or inaction, I suppose. But again, the idea is to get ahead of this, and then when things settle down, to blunt this enough so that then we can unwind anything we wind up. And that's not just true about this, that's true about anything that we're doing.
So the article in Lancet breaks each of those 3 non-pharmacologic regimens down, and each, as far as they can figure, has a certain percentage reduction or lowers the relative risk of infection. But it's still too soon to tell. And if you look at what happens in a bar, it's a combination of things, really, because it's failure to wear a mask, or failure to wear a mask properly, or ignoring that, which in itself is really probably the most significant. And then lack of social distancing, talking loud or whatever, where the virus is not only going out in liquid particulate, but the aerosols are greater in the air, because we know there's 2 ways that spreads. So what happens in at least some of these establishments involves all of those factors except for eye protection, maybe even eye protection.
So Mr. Neese is available to answer any questions about defining these establishments. And I was reminded that in our previous orders that we did, we were able to work with the industry and clearly define bars and places that serve food too, and worked with them to do that. And so, Ronnie, are you back on? Can you speak to that, since you know more about that than I do?
Yeah, we were able to work with the different establishments to determine, whether they were serving food or not serving food, and whether they were just a straight bar. The only problem that we would have we have no way of determining what their sales, amount of their sales deal with food. We're just looking at the food preparation and how they serve it, but we have no way of determining that aspect of a facility. It would be hard for us to go into a place and determine what their sales would account for. But we got a lot of cooperation when we were doing this earlier, talking with the owners and working with them to try to limit their spacing. There is, as Mr. Brace said earlier, we have just a few that's been giving us some issues, and we have been working with them to try to resolve those issues. But it's just like you said earlier, that it's overcrowding everybody together without wearing their mask. It's creating the issue in those places. But there are a lot out there that are really doing a really good job of complying with the mask issue, of spacing their tables out, and being good citizens of the community.
Could I just bring up one other way of maybe looking at this? And that would be, if we needed to do something and be positive, is this a time where we talk about limiting social gatherings, which seem to have been one of our biggest issues? Now, they're difficult to find where they're occurring unless they're in a commercial space. We're at 50 or under right now, but could there be the possibility for say a 28-day period, we did something where it was 25 and under, to clamp down on where we have that problem of, the percentage of people who might come in with COVID and spread it. There is the Georgia Tech application that tells you, based on our current numbers, what the percentage chance is of somebody in a group being a problem. So is that another alternative? It sounds like most of our establishments are trying to be helpful. I don't want to stand in the way of, we need to do something, but what is the correct something additional at this point? I'd just like to talk about that a little bit.
My comment, I guess, would be the most important thing you could probably do in the short term would be to, number one, find out what the definition of a bar is in terms of no food or however that would be done from Tennessee Code Annotated. And number two, try to elicit cooperation from all stakeholders as soon as possible so they know that something really serious is going on, and if there's not a simple way that this can be fixed on their from their part, we have to do something. But the way this
Along
might be
the same lines,
from,
I mean, I see no reason why, again, as I mentioned earlier, as a group, we can consider amending the definition of a bar. I think it's great that public health and private, business basically has had a working relationship, and there's no reason to assume that we can't continue on that trajectory. Dr. O'Brien, I appreciate your perspective about limiting social gatherings to 25. In this context, I would propose us to consider that the logistics of 25 people who are drinking are probably not going to be, people don't gather in these types of situations and environments to maintain their a physical or social distance. They don't get together to not talk or laugh or have a good time. So again, I want to be clear that the intent of this proposal is to reduce illness and death in our community. I've had several emails from people in the community telling me, this is such a minor, making such a minor overall impact on the health of our citizens, and death is a part of life. That is a fact, but I would pose, would you want your healthcare provider, your physician, your nurse practitioner, your nurse to tell you that when you've got someone, a loved one in the hospital who's very ill or dying of COVID? I've also gotten feedback from people saying, well, we need to really put quality of life over quantity so that, old people are going to die. But by the same token, I would ask, would you say that to someone whose child is dying of perhaps COVID or another disease? They had a brief but short and happy life. So these are things that I think distract us from our purpose, which is ultimately to keep everyone safe, to keep resources freed up and available, including nursing, which Dr. Shumi has addressed, so that everyone gets care and that we don't have to shut down essential services in the hospital due to staffing issues, staffing burnout. I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, I don't know what the most recent numbers are, but as of 2 weeks ago, over 500 nurses and doctors had died in this country. Now that, sure, that's a small amount of the US population, but still these are people who are putting themselves on the front line to make sure everyone gets care, not only COVID patients. But so I think we can, we can certainly amend it. We can collaborate and put our heads together and think of the overall intent and how to achieve that. My 2 cents.
So
Go ahead.
the one thing is I look at this, number 2, where we talk about when this takes effect. One thing we have heard from businesses is give us a little time. So the only thing I was wondering is, could we push that out just a little bit to give them a little time to change their operations and be better prepared to be compliant? I'm not talking about pushing out a long time. I don't have a date in mind, but that's, to tomorrow night. So would you entertain pushing it out a little further than that, just to let people kind of get change up their operations and be ready to be compliant? And I should, if I'm going to suggest something, I probably should have an idea of what a new date would be, but I don't, sorry.
I mean, one of the biggest problems is us defining what a bar really is versus maybe a nightclub. That's the sort of thing that may take a little bit of time to sit down and find that out. I can tell you if you get a liquor license in Tennessee and you sell beer as your one thing, and you have a little bit of food, they take all of your food that you sell, even if it's 15%, and count that as everything, because they don't count beer toward your percentage of food sales. It's kind of crazy, but that's what it is. So you can apply for certain licenses with the state, even though you may only really truly have 15% food sales. So I think we're going to have, I want us to find a way to work this out. The problem is defining it tonight to get it ready to be put in force, and something that is reasonable for our business owners in the community, for them to even know. I used to be one of them. I'll just say that. And so I understand this is a difficult thing to say and to come up with. So I think we need to think of that. Is it a bar or is it a nightclub we're looking at, where you have more problems with gathering and mosh pits and et cetera? So that's the sort of thing I think we need to try to define.
Ronnie, are you back? Ronnie? So I'm sorry. I think that this definition would cover nightclubs. We just don't call nightclubs a bar. So it's a word thing. But Ronnie, would this definition cover nightclubs?
It would cover nightclubs, but it would also encompass a lot of other establishments. The 50% would. It would cover nightclubs, but they sell very little food. It's mainly drinks that they sell.
So my question is, how can we define an establishment that limits partying, basically? I mean, I understand people want to go to a restaurant and have a drink with their meal. But we're talking about close quarters where people have gathered primarily to drink alcohol, and you can't wear a mask when you're drinking. I mean, that's common sense. And we've already addressed, we don't know what the data is going to show. We can anticipate, common sense would tell us what we can anticipate when UT opens. And this is again, this is a risk point, not only for UT, but basically for our public schools. So, the longer common sense and what we see in other cities, the longer bars stay open to the community, the higher the risk to the community at large. But specifically, I mean, school is getting ready to start. So we need to think about the impact on our teachers and our students as well.
And I don't want to lose sight of something that you just said, is that, UT they've really put a lot of work into a reopening plan. And the reality is that if a student is protected for all of their official UT activities, it won't take much. I feel like everything we can do to help those students get an education is what we need to do. And there's that's part of the timeliness of this issue, is the fact that school's getting ready to start again. That concerns me.
So I have a question to Mr. Neese and Mr. Brace. In examining these establishments and looking for compliance, do you have a feel for how many bars actually actively or any of these similar establishments, how many of these actively say we require masks, we require social distancing, rather than just sort of free-for-all? So how many have actively tried to be compliant with this in your estimation?
This is Ronnie. I would think in looking at most facilities, the ones that are restaurants are doing a very good job of handling this, keeping separation and the mask issue. It's the ones that sell very little food that are basically, has been, Dr. O'Brien said, nightclubs where their main source is just for drinking. That would be the ones, but I would say 75 to 80% of the facilities are doing a good job. There would be another that would fall in that category that would not be doing that on a regular basis. Mr. Brace, what do you think about that with your staff of what they've seen and the complaints through 311? I think he's not on with us anymore, but I would have to talk with our staff to see exactly how that would play out and what would be their percentage. But it's mainly going to be the ones that deal with straight. Mostly their income is from alcohol sales and not like a restaurant. Would be the ones that would not be, the ones that are in compliance, and the one that just sell a lot of alcohol would be out of compliance with this.
Mr. Neese, I have a question. Is there a language that the city has used before to describe those types of facilities that are primarily alcohol driven in terms of sales? What we call a nightclub, it's just that simple, that word nightclub, and that it's self-defining, or is there more specific language that has been used or could be used?
There is, and I can't recall right at this time the exact wording, but we do have a category that's just for a bar that doesn't serve food. We do have that category, and I can't tell you at this time how many that we have here in Knox County, but we do have a category that under the state regulations that does declare that it's just a bar. I could get that information, but I don't have it available right at this time.
Thank you.
One thing to bring up where I want to parse this out is just that is, we have people who own businesses who have beer permits. And in our community, that's a lot of the craft beer industry. They do not sell liquor. They are not places that people come and hang out and as a nightclub. Then we have people that own facilities that are more nightclubs. They have liquor licenses. Their predominant sales are more liquor, not beer and wine, but that's a piece of it. That's where I have an issue for our community and for business owners. I would like to protect, those people who do what they're supposed to be doing and who operate under beer permits separately from people who operate under liquor licenses. And so that's something I just want to throw out to the group. There is a difference. The three legal entities in our county, the town of Farragut, city of Knoxville, and the county, do beer permitting for those. The rest go to the state and get permitted for a license for sale of liquor. And well, it's actually, you get everything. You get liquor, wine, and beer together. So that's a whole different group. So that's just something I want to think about, because most of the others are our local craft brewers.
Yeah.
This is Diana. I thought I had read that Nashville set a time limit on when alcohol could be sold, like 10 p.m. or something like that.
I haven't heard of that. My understanding was that they had actually closed their bars. So I'm looking at the phase 1 reopening guidance that we used locally. We didn't really use a legal definition. We used drinking only establishments are not open for on-site consumption. So I'm not sure that would work. I know that in other places, and when the governor did his original order to close things down and then some reopening, they used, I wish I could, it has to do with the word, Ronnie, help me, the word service is in there, limited service facilities or restaurants. That was the language. Right, Ronnie? Limited service.
Yes, that sounds correct, Dr. Buchanan.
I was trying to pull up Nashville's regulation, but I can't find it right now.
For the state, that is the group where you get a license for wine or for liquor, not for beer.
Right.
And so that's where that falls. You apply it to the ABC and you get one of those two. And a limited service restaurant is, you can do it as a wine only or as a liquor license.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Myers Morton, what I'm reading here makes this order that you're contemplating makes it a crime to put somebody in jail for 30 days for violating this order. That gives exclusive jurisdiction to enforcement to the sheriff. The health department does not have any jurisdiction to enforce this as written. The health department only enforces ordinances by the Knox County Commission. So the health department would not have any jurisdiction to enforce this by law, okay?
How could it be written to change that?
I'm not sure this board can pass an ordinance. You've asked me a new question. The county commission normally does ordinances. I'm just saying the way you've got it written, it's a crime, 30 days in jail. And the only law enforcement in the county is the Knox County Sheriff. And y'all hadn't, I don't think anybody's talked to the sheriff about this. In the city, it's the Knoxville Police Department. But the health department doesn't have any jurisdiction over this order because it has the weight of a state criminal law. That's what it's adopted. So the health department wouldn't have any ability to enforce anything. And so I'm sorry, doctor, I don't know. If you're asking me if there's a way to change this to make it where it can be enforced by like an ordinance, there may be a way, doctor, but I'm sorry, as I sit here, I don't have an answer for you right this second.
Well, the good thing is we just heard that the Attorney General for the state just affirmed that public health boards can have legal orders and that there's no issue with those. They are not unconstitutional. So I would think if that came down to it, it was something that could be enforced if we got there. But we want to do the same thing as we did with the mask order as best we can. We want people to comply with whatever we're doing and try to keep it on a non-citation basis, though this one will lead more to citation because I know of some owners who have been very vocal about what they intend to do if something like this is ordered.
Yeah, and that'll have to come from the sheriff. The health department can't write citations for this.
I would like to ask Mr. Morton, in all sincerity, help me understand how the proposal for this regulation is different than the ones the board has proposed and passed previously. Previously, the face mask wearing, for example, which with attached to it, yes, is the potential, the possibility for a fine and 30 days in jail, misdemeanor, same as smoking in restaurants. So how is this different? This actual document and what it proposes in terms of being enforced, and I think we all agree as a board, we really don't want to be punitive. We're terribly sensitive to the fact that we've got to keep this economy going, but we have also got to keep everyone safe, especially our school children safe. So how does this differ? Because from my understanding of our rights, our responsibilities, we're Tennessee code annotated and that we are allowed to do exactly what we're doing.
You've heard
Help me understand how this is than what we've previously proposed and passed as a board.
You've heard my advice. And second, I can't answer that. We've got litigation. Okay, we can't go there. There's litigation. You can't comment. I can't comment on pending litigation. Okay.
I will say this. I think this is a good starting place, a good launching point for us as the board to work on and work from. We can make amendments right here and now in terms of when this goes into effect, how we define bars. Should it be, I mean, this specifically says in on premises, limiting it to that, but we can modify this. In terms of legality, I believe the law is clear and is on our side. But ultimately, as one of my colleagues said, we'll have to let the courts decide what's unconstitutional. What my personal and my professional opinion is to do nothing is unconscionable. We have to take action now to avoid the train wreck that's coming our way. If we do nothing, we have to do something.
And thank you. And I don't want to lose the sight of the fact that just a few days ago, a representative from the White House expressed the concern about the state, really went through that, essentially through that document that we've already reviewed. And then the governor said that, I mean, you know, we're one of the counties that has the authority to make this decision. And Mr. Morton, I believe at one point indicated that it was this board that would be making these decisions. And so the sequence of the decision making, and I say this in that this is not, just to be clear, this is not an enjoyable debate for anybody who's involved in this. We are all people who are here because we were part of this board and called to be part of this decision-making process. And as the Board of Health, our focus is on again, it's the health. We're the Board of Health. It is the health of the population. And I do feel like we have been deliberate in watching data and outcomes up to this point. But that being said, this is not something that I would say is a position I would choose to be in because of the ramifications of all of these difficult decisions. And I want to make that clear. And Dr. O'Brien, to your earlier point about gathering size, I don't see these as being mutually exclusive. I would say that you know, that one's maybe even harder to really implement and enforce. But I wouldn't, I mean, again, based on what the White House report would say, we potentially need to do more than one thing. Whether it's all done at the same time, I don't know. But this also may be, just as this discussion, this may be an incremental response until we see this COVID situation settle down, which it has not as of yet.
Dr. Shami, thank you. I think that, you know, we can find a way to move forward here. You know, I'm trying to look out for those areas and try to restrict the effect on a small group that I know and care about. And I think that one way to do that would be to limit this and leave everything in number 3, except add that these are up with a Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission license. Because if you don't have that, all you have is a beer permit. You're one of the probably craft breweries in town, and they are small. Most of them have outdoor space. Most of them they do what needs to be done. I just don't want to affect one segment of our business community adversely compared to what we are talking about, which I think are nightclubs, which is where I'm worried about our college students. And I think going forward that's something we need to look at. And this could be something we also put a period of time that we would have to watch. We'd have to reaffirm this every week like we do the other one. And so I would just like to at least bring that up for discussion or a friendly amendment to just add based on a Tennessee Alcoholic Beverage Commission license at the end of number 3.
So
this is Martha.
Sorry.
I'm looking at Nashville's most recent order, and I think they've solved our problem. So they use the definition, of a nightclub that holds a liquor license, and they also have verbiage to address craft breweries. So then, so bars that hold an on-premise beer permit but do not hold a license issued by the Tennessee ABC shall close until 12:01 a.m. Central until on July 17th, but may continue to provide curbside or off-premise delivery of beverages subject to any applicable federal blah, blah, blah. So that allows them to continue to do curbside, which is what we let them do previously. And that worked for them. So that takes people out, and they're not inside the bar gathering, but it covers those craft breweries. They have to change their process, but they've been able to do that in the past. And then the other one covers the places that are just serving alcohol. So I don't know if we would want to, I'm just trying to figure out how we could amend that to.
So, question, either for Mr. Neese or Dr. Buchanan or Mr. Morton or anyone. We are in a yellow warning area as opposed to Nashville, which is in a red warning area. When they were in a yellow warning area, what was their response to liquor licenses, bars, closure times, numbers of patrons? What did they do when they were in yellow? Because their response and our response may at this point need to be the same, or it may need to be different.
I would argue that, and this is Dr. Buchanan, I would argue that Nashville's doing a really good job, but I would argue that they've stayed a little behind the 8 ball in response, especially if you look at their numbers. One of the things I think that kept us with having low numbers in the beginning was that we acted quickly. By the time they did a safer at home order, they had over 100 cases. When we did our safer at home order, I can't remember, we had way under 100 cases. So I think acting quickly is probably better. And so I'm trying to, and I don't know what they did when they were yellow. I don't have the time to be able to keep up with what all the other jurisdictions are doing. So I don't know if anybody on the call knows what they did when they were yellow.
This is Myers Morton. I have no idea, Mr. Chairman. Sorry.
So I don't know if we want to, would a friendly amendment, Maria or Dr. Hurt, be to add the, and I can't share it with you. Can I share, can you let me share my screen?
Yes.
Hold on, we're going to try to let me share my screen so you guys can read what I'm talking about.
Okay. I would like to point out that Article 6 specifically addresses that this law does not include, or mandate, regulation does not include off premises. So if, for instance, a brewery wants to provide to sell stuff, but just not have in-house consumption, I mean, that addresses those vulnerabilities for our small business owners. Being more specific, adopting language from Nashville or other cities that have been effective in implementing these kinds of measures is I'm certainly welcome.
How about indoor versus outdoor consumption? What are regulations that are in force in Nashville on that? No outdoor consumption, just takeout?
Just takeout, yep. Yes.
They implemented on July 3rd originally. I don't know what phase.
Yeah, so they're right. You can't consume on site. We had a problem with that when we closed things down previously. People were hanging out. They were actually bringing chairs and hanging out and congregating. So we had some challenges with that. So you wouldn't want people congregating outside the bar either. They would need to take it off premise to consume it, which is allowed under one of the executive orders. You can get to go cups of alcohol now. It's like, so anyway, let me try to share my screen. Now I have to go back to where I was. There we go. apologize. There it is. So I'm looking at this paragraph here, which I can't highlight this because it's scanned. It says section 4 is replaced with the following, and this paragraph here, substituting that or adding that as a number 3 and or number 4, whatever. So I'll give you time to read that. Whole thing. Oh, are we unmuted now? So has everybody had time to read that paragraph? Just this paragraph? Yes. Okay. So if you scroll on down, where it says section 5 is revised, that's the other part I was speaking about. And that would cover the 2 things I think we're talking about.
So, Dr. O'Brien, I think when you were talking earlier about our craft breweries and the potential for outdoor services or, potential for food being served with trucks, it looks like this provision would only allow them to have takeout service and not have food service because of the 50% rule. How do we address that? My comfort level is that we've got voids in our wording here that might not work well in practice. I'm just concerned about that.
We're not disallowing food trucks. Food trucks can operate, and they can operate in lots of places, not just at bars. Food trucks have lots of options of where they can operate.
How about outdoor dining at a craft brewery as a concrete example?
I don't understand your question. I'm sorry.
So if somebody's operating a craft brewery and they have a food truck that comes in and patrons are outside, properly distanced, and they are eating and consuming beer, is that prohibited with what we're proposing?
Yes, it is. If they want to get food from the food truck and beer from the beer place, they take it off premise to eat it. Right, Maria, Dr. Hurt, was that the intention?
Yes, nothing on site. My understanding after reading this and reading, of course, what I propose is that it's just basically 2 ways to skin the cat. The end result and goal is the same, which is to keep people from imbibing alcohol in closed spaces for long periods of time without a mask. For, as I think maybe Dr. Shmaya mentioned, I imagine and anticipate we're going to revisit this regularly based on the data that that we continue to get, looking at the numbers that reflect the safety and well-being of our citizens.
So just for clarification, I'm sorry to have you repeat yourself with what Dr. Gotcher asked. If you buy something at a food truck and you buy alcohol someplace else, you could not consume those on site. You would have to leave.
Correct.
Am I correct? Okay, thank you.
So I keep going back, trying to figure out how to do a friendly amendment to include this language if we think it's appropriate to include this language for definition purposes.
I was still hoping that we might allow those businesses to still operate more fully, even though they don't, again, the ones with food trucks are able to operate almost like a restaurant, but it's two entities dealing with the food. So I'm not sure if there's a, what I was hoping for was to allow them to still operate. They are not someplace that people go and sit and drink. It's usually people go in, order, maybe have a beer and then head home, or they get a little bite to eat. So, but I'll let the rest kind of deal with it. But I was hoping that we could just amend it to ABC licensed facilities at this point, but I'm open.
Dr. O'Brien is someone who's had experience or knows folks that are in that business. How is this going to affect their income? How's this going to affect their ability to stay open? What's your thought?
My colleagues in the community, I'm out of that business, but my colleagues will be, it's going to really hurt some of them quite a bit. They are small businesses. They are small business owners. I'm not in that business anymore for a reason. It's a tough business. And these are people who, it's mostly family owned. They do good work. Yes, they're doing stuff where they're not having people sit at a bar, they're having to sit at tables. And that's what I was hoping to be able to continue for them, so that they could come in, people could eat, could have a beer, could order a growler fill to go home and support those specific businesses. I'm okay with everybody else. I'm just trying to protect one part of our economy that has been growing and has been doing a great job. And I'm afraid we're going to lose a number of those businesses if we don't assist them with that. That's all I was trying to do in that case.
So 2 points, Dr. O'Brien, and I'm going to admittedly talk out of both sides of my mouth here for a second. But on one hand, we already talked about the unintended potential consequences. And so if one segment of the industry is closed, then what you describe as just have a beer and one beer and grab a bite and go, that could transition into something that isn't the way it is right now. And we could just transplant the issue to a different type of facility. I worry about that. On the other hand, what I'll simply say is I think we're going to be in the midst of incremental action. And that's whether we're winding or unwinding something. And so I think I'm at the point where I have the level of concern that action of some kind is warranted and certainly better than inaction. But as to the specifics of the nuanced issues that you raise, I don't necessarily have the answer, other than my general sense is that if you had two options, one is to do more and then bring back half of it, versus to just incrementally week after week after week just kind of chip away at it. I'm afraid that strategy is going to get us, to whatever extent, wherever we are now, I think it'll get us behind the eight ball going forward. But that being said, my main priority is that we walk out of here with some sort of action.
And I agree, we need some action. Nashville went ahead and did all of these things. They did that plus the restriction of social gatherings. We never really have covered that at this point. But that's, again, it may be one of those things that we've got to do something. But I just still would like to protect a group that I don't see as being one of our proximate causes at this point. It's going to be about 18 to 20 some businesses in our community. That's why I was looking at it that way.
So Dr. O'Brien, does your comment about whether they have a liquor license or a beer license, and not being primarily a restaurant, but having either a liquor or beer license, does that solve the problem?
Well, if they have a beer permit, those are going to be predominantly what we're talking, I'm talking about the craft beer businesses that we have in town. Nobody else really wants to have just a beer permit. They want to have a liquor license. So that's where they're trying to make their money. You're going to find instead that a lot of these other folks are going to, that are beer only are those small businesses that I'm talking about. Now, admittedly, I will admit when I was in business, I was a limited service restaurant with an ABC license. So I did have beer as a predominant sales item, and we also had wine at the business we owned. But that's what we did. Plus we had food. We served food.
It looks like we could at least address that as being separate, so we could be more surgical in terms of where the real problem is, and then amend back to beer permits if it turned out that that was a problem. That would be more my personal thinking on that.
Let me get back to the, because these might pair together. So Dr. O'Brien, when you were going the route of gatherings, and Dr. Buchanan and anybody else, so a gathering size limitation applies to a business or it does not?
As I understand it, usually applies to, in fact, you look on the screen, section 7, what Nashville used. It's going to apply to businesses, facilities, music venues, a rental space. It's basically putting on the business, let's say a gathering for, some social event, family event. It's going to be the business who's going to have to restrict the numbers who are going to be on the floor in that gathering. And so we're not going to be able to restrict the ones that are private at somebody's home, let's be honest. But it's going to be more, an event location, a rental location, music venues, just like it states there, that would have to enforce this and say, you can only have this many people in the room and we'll book it up to 25 and no more.
So those craft breweries would be limited to that. I guess what I'm saying is if we're going to make that distinction and be, as Dr. Gocher said, surgical about it, then the other way to avoid that unintended consequence that I described for those the ones that just have the beer license is to make sure that not too many people get crammed in there at the same time. So maybe
everybody be in favor of that. I know the owners would. They don't want to have people packed in there. They want to be able to just still be open and have some incremental business.
I don't know if that ends up being then a separate resolution, which is, this board does not yet have the experience voting on something that's not already a written resolution. So I don't even know the precedent for that, but I'm just throwing that out as an idea that could be a compromise to accomplish both things.
So question to Dr. Buchanan and Mr. Morton. When we last passed something that really affected the public, it was the mask order. And the mask order does not, in many ways, affect anybody's economics. It's just something that you would wear when you went to a business. This affects economics. And so it's a critical distinction to how to proceed. And from a legal standpoint, it's also a critical decision. I know that the way the virus is expanding, that a week makes a difference. How can we accomplish trying to make sure that this is tight or more constructed legally, and also encompasses what I think the board is trying to offer forth in a timely fashion? And either Dr. Buchanan or Mr. Morton address that. none of us are in the legal profession, and trying to parse this out is time consuming. And, you know, in chairing other meetings before, sometimes you just need to go back and get the measure properly crafted. The way we stand now, that would be a week until we could look at it, and a week makes a difference. So how can we accomplish these goals? How can this be done?
Well, this is Mr. Morton. I still hadn't read the whole thing yet. I'm this board's attorney. I work on it in the morning. I mean, unless you, you know, y'all gonna, Dr. Shamil was correct. This is a policy decision that this board is gonna make. And if I'm gonna have any input, I'll do my best to provide you proper input and editing according to your wishes. But I don't know that I can do it this evening. I mean, I still haven't seen it completely because the way I've got on the screen, some of the language is blocked off. And plus, another thing that's handicapping me is I can't comment about certain things because of pending litigation. My hands are tied. But I'll work for you if you need me to, but I don't know how it's going to happen tonight.
Dr. Gocher, I think that if I withdraw my comment about the 25 and just where we were headed with Dr. O'Brien and the circled language, I think we were really close to getting something that would be presentable for a vote. So that's one point that I would make.
So we are looking at crafting this for people that are strictly ABC licensed and not with a beer permit. Is that what we're looking at this week or at this time?
No, I don't, this is Martha, I'm just speaking from my perspective. I appreciate your comments, Dr. O'Brien, but I think we can't say that one primarily drinking establishment is a problem and another one's not. I just don't see how that plays out. And people go, I've been to breweries and craft breweries, and people go and gather. That's what you do at a bar. And it doesn't matter which kind it is. So I don't think we can make that distinction. But that's just from my public health perspective, that's my thought. I'm actually asking Mr. Neese to look at both languages because it's his staff that'll be having to interpret this. So I'm asking him to look at the language and see which language is something that is more functional for them in the application of this ordinance, or not an ordinance, regulation. So that's what I've been doing. Sorry, that's why I may go off screen again to have a conversation just to see what he says about that. Staff will be responsible for this.
Dr. Buchanan, are you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think we can adopt those provisions from the Nashville rulings into ours that you had circled?
That's what we're looking at. I've got my staff who would be doing this, looking at that. And the other thing, Myers, the paragraph 9, no, it's not 9. Let me find it. No, paragraph 8 says that the Knox County Health Director may. I don't. There's no shall there. It's just a may. So request for injunctions and seek any other remedy. So it's not a shall. The way I read it, anyway.
We've gone a long time on this. I think we need to get some movement. I think if we can go ahead and see if we could incorporate the Nashville wording that was more specific, and let's see if that's something that we can go with. You know, I've talked about all this, but we need to do something, and we need to make a positive change for our public. And so I think we just need to see if we can get that, and then we could maybe do the same thing where it is it needs to be looked at within 2 weeks, which is what Nashville did. They did a 2-week order, and then it has to be re-looked at and reaffirmed if needed. So just let's take a look once you get it up.
So Dr. O'Brien, the idea behind a order that sunsets might be a little more appealing to business owners, because if they have an indefinite period where they are out of business, I mean, in some folks' business, 30 days is going to be it. They're not going to be able to restart. So at 2 weeks, that may at least give us time to look and see about changing things, improvements, or whether the community is improving any. It may be a month until you know it, as you go through 2 cycles of infection.
And that's true. And I think that's very reasonable. But maybe put a 2-week and then we relook at it and see what we have to do and kind of go from there. We just need to do something. I agree with everybody here. We got to move and do something to help in this pandemic.
So, you unmute me. I'm trying to find, I had that up and now I can't find it. So hang on a second. Mr. Neese has reviewed the language in both documents and believes that the language as it is in the document you have before, as written, is adequate and can be interpreted easily by operators and by those enforcing it. So they are comfortable with the language as it is, as the folks, because it will cover the entities we've been talking about and allow for off-premise sales, which that keeps some of those businesses able to continue selling and providing service. So are you reading the other stuff now?
Yes, I gave you section 4 from Nashville. Okay.
Sorry about that. Just, we want to get the language right so the operators and those enforcing it can interpret it and use it, obviously.
So one suggestion about tightening the language, from a legal standpoint and an operational standpoint, is that we may wish as a board to review this in some detail next week. Rather than put it off to a week, you can review it next week. And, if there's something that just we haven't thought of, that's just blatantly off, or something we may wish to revise, then we might be able to do it at that time.
And one thing, if we looked at that Nashville language that's up on the screen right now, that wouldn't really include every bar that's out there, because that talks about the limited service restaurant. There's some places that just don't serve food, pretty much, and they pay hefty fees and licensing. So I don't know if that would be everybody, but if the current language that's written is okay with Mr. Neese, then maybe we should just go with that.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll start my video. So he's again fine with that. And then the other thing that so the friendly amendment I would offer is to let this start midnight, August 2nd, which is Sunday, as opposed to tomorrow night, giving operators a little bit of time to change process.
I agree with that.
Dr. Hurt, would you be okay with that friendly amendment?
Sure would. Yes.
How about a friendly amendment with a 2-week sunset with revisiting at that point?
So a 2-week sunset means it goes away. So it would be revisited in 2 weeks?
Formally vote and reaffirm it. It's just something to tell our business owners we're not leaving this totally open-ended for them.
So that requires an action and a vote every 2 weeks, essentially. Is that what we're saying?
Well, or in 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, we may say indefinite or.
Understood. And so as long as we are, the only situation with setting a very specific time frame I could see is that right now we're on this very regular weekly meeting cycle. And then if at some point we call a 48-hour meeting for some emergency, then we might not, I could see that. I don't know that our meetings will be as precisely predictable as they are currently, just depending on the course of the pandemic. So we could lock ourselves into a meeting 2 days after a meeting. But I don't have any problem with that, but just throwing that out there. I don't know how else to do it. I agree with you that the intent is that we indicate that this is going to get regular attention with every regularly scheduled meeting. So I have no opposition to that whatsoever.
I would tend to agree with that. Is there other discussion on the motion? There has been a motion and a second. It's been a long time ago. I have to make sure that we actually had a motion and a second. I believe we did. Narda, do you have anything in the minutes that reflect that? Or Mr. Morton? It's been a long time ago.
I'm sorry, Mr. Morton has lost track, Mr. Chairman. I hope Narda knows.
No, Narda does not. I do not.
Well, what I suggest, Mr. Chairman, is have Ms. Hurt repeat what her motion is and have make sure it's clear what the motion is and confirm that whoever the second is, and then have your vote is my advice.
That sounds reasonable. So with that in mind, Dr. Hurt, would you succinctly restate that resolution based on what we've been reading? And then we'll entertain that motion and then a second and then any other discussion and then a vote.
I propose and move that we adopt this proposed regulation with the amendments to change when it goes into effect, to include that we review it regularly, and help me out here, people, if there's a better way to put this, and that we more clearly clarify the language defining those businesses that will be impacted.
I don't think we need further clarification of the businesses after discussing with my staff.
Okay. All right, so we're going to stick with it because Ronnie, Mr. Neese found that the language holds. So I'm proposing that we adopt this with the change in when it goes into effect, correct? And that it undergoes ongoing regular review. We decide at every meeting or every week or whatever the group feels is most amenable to what we can do in good conscience for all parties involved.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second it. Diane Drake.
Any further discussion?
So I think we need to clarify whatever language is going to be in there about how often it is. I'm sure we're going to talk about this at every regularly scheduled meeting. I'm still not clear whether it just expires or whether it, but that needs to be in there, I assume, explicitly. If it expires, not whether we're going to talk about it every meeting, that if it's going to have a specific expiration, that type of thing needs to be in there in the event that if it were not renewed.
Yeah, I would like to propose the 2 week on looking here at August 12th meeting that we re-vote it. And if we have to tighten it up or we need to add to it on that meeting on the 12th, we do what we need to do, but we at least have a vote for continuance and or amendment at that time.
So just a suggestion for that, this regulation shall remain in place for 2 weeks and with review by the Board of Health on August 12th. 2 weeks after its inception, that'll be a little less than 2 weeks, because if it goes into effect in August, then that'll give us a little bit of leeway. So
Want to do August 19th?
I'm not looking at the calendar. Do we meet? Oh yeah, we do meet on August 19th.
Would that be a friendly amendment, Dr. Hurt? To go August?
I just want to, excuse me, I want to point out that we can just add that, right? It's a point 13 that we'll review this every time we meet.
We could, but I think that it's helpful to have a sunset of some sort where it's gonna, and that's fine. We can say we're just gonna review it every time we meet if everybody's okay with that.
But we don't have a sunset for for the masks.
That, as we stated earlier, the mask was a non-economic factor. This is economic. So that's why I wanted to encourage that it will expire on, let's say, August 19th, unless a vote is held to reaffirm it.
I would simply recommend a date of an expiration is a date a Thursday after a meeting. I guess we could put a time. We could say expires at midnight on Wednesday night if not reaffirmed. And I'm at peace either with the 12th or the 19th. The fact of the matter is we need a little bit of time, whatever action we take, to see if it's really had an impact or not.
Yep.
Any other discussion?
So I need some clarification on, so we want this to go into effect at 12:01, August 2nd, August 3rd. August 2nd is a Sunday, or 12:01, August 3rd, which is a Monday. Excuse me. Does it matter?
How about 12:01, August 3rd, and then we have the sunset at midnight of that Wednesday, August 19th.
I think that's fine.
Sure.
So after our meeting, which we will hopefully reaffirm it.
Mr. Chairman, make sure you repeat what you're voting on to make sure everyone's clear, please.
So from my understanding, that is going to be clause 13. I mean, we have to put it somewhere. Where would you all propose?
I would think it should be number 13 is expiration of this order is at midnight of August 19th, 2020.
Okay, we need to do it August 20th, because if it sunsets at midnight on the 19th, it sunsets before we meet.
That's right.
So August 20th. So the two amendments, as I understand them, we're amending paragraph 2 to say the regulation shall take effect at 12:01 a.m., August 3rd, 2020. And with the addition of number 13 saying this regulation will expire midnight, August 20th, 2020, unless renewed by the Board of Health prior to that.
Is there something about, I see 12:01 being used. Is there a reason we should use that number? I don't know.
I'm fine with 12:01.
I saw that in some of these others. That's all.
That's just, I'm not sure why. That's how all of them are written. So that's fine. We can stick with that. Is everybody okay with those amendments?
Yes, I believe that's generally used just to avoid confusion. When you say midnight of a day or date, people often, it's not uncommon for them to be a little unclear about what midnight actually is. So 12:01 a.m. makes that very clear for us.
So we have a motion and a second, and we've had discussion on the details of this motion. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Narda, would you give us a roll call vote on this, please?
Yes, certainly. Drake,
Yes.
Goucher,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
I understand this is a very hard decision for all of you, and I understand this is nothing that we want to be, any of us want to make a decision about. I do believe that this still does put the county at liability. I have to vote no.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Sousa,
Yes.
and Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you. 7 yeses, 1 no.
The next item on our agenda, I'd like to get through the agenda, even though we're running late. I think we should be able to finish reasonably soon, is a review of the Knox County Schools and Knox County Health Department letter of support.
You were, Danielle, please follow me. Somebody's going to share that with you. It's really brief. It's not very detailed at all. And we'll get it up on letterhead and stuff, but thanks.
Any discussion about that? Anything we need to add to the letter? Martha, there's just a couple of changes regarding degrees, name, all that I can go over with you tomorrow.
Okay.
Any other discussion on that we are going to be working as a team in terms of Knox County opening schools? Any other discussion about that?
If a motion's needed, I move that we adopt that and send that.
We have a motion. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? If not, Narda, if you'll run a roll call for us again.
Drake,
Yes.
Goucher,
Yes.
Hurt,
Yes.
Jacobs,
Yes.
O'Brien,
Yes.
Shamia,
Yes.
Sousa,
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Thank you.
So on item 11, we have other business. Is there any other business to come before our board meeting this evening?
So I have one item that it's as much a discussion about how we're going to organize our work as a board going forward as it is about a specific issue, but it is also about a specific issue. And what I mean by that is that Dr. O'Brien had mentioned, and there'd been some discussion about limiting gathering size. Let's use that as an example. And we just went through this experience of, I mean, I know this is the Sunshine Law, and we have historically brought an ordinance or a resolution, and then it's not even knowing if it's going to kind of make it to the light of day, having people help us. And so I guess my question would be, is there a role to do this? And time is of the essence on these things. And I've already made that point a few times. And so if a decision is made today, waiting 7 days to be able to look at a draft and to implement that decision in this environment is probably not appropriate. But at the same time, you know, the other way to organize some of this work, and it can work either way. It's worked fine so far, but I'm just thinking that this is not going to end anytime really soon. And so we could, for example, I could propose a discussion about limiting gathering size to 25 instead of 50, and we could have a debate in concept, and we could vote. I'm asking this question. I don't know how this is supposed to work. We could vote in concept, and then somebody says, okay, I'll bring that back, and then we can, hammer out the specifics of the language, knowing that it had, whether it's an 8-0 or 7-1 or 6, whatever is the vote. And then of course we would have to vote again to actually pass whatever it was that had been drafted. My concern about that, though, is that if we really felt like it was important in this environment, then we're in a situation of calling an emergency meeting 48 hours later to do that, which is okay if that's the only item of business, is to review that and to approve it, and so it can then be implemented. But I think that this is a complex set of circumstances and a difficult environment to do the decision making. I totally respect the Sunshine Law. I understand it. I get it. But trying to deliberate in this way, a language in something, this is a challenge. And so I honestly would like to address the gathering size, but I don't have anything in my back pocket written to address it. And so I guess my question is, first, how can we do that? Or is this really the way we need to continue to function?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the Knox County Law Director's Office is the law office for this board. And I'm here. If you all need something drawn up, I can do that. Lawyers are servants. I serve this board. Keeping things out of hidden from me beforehand sure slows down the process. But if this board wants something done, wants some legal work, I'm here for it. And that's what we're here for. So anything you need drawn up, that's my job. Okay?
Mr. Morton, I have a question about that. So if a document is drawn up, how far ahead of the meeting can it be sent to the members? I understand the members can't debate it amongst themselves, but just to be able to read it and, make notes. County Commission's agenda and the agenda items are out there well in advance of the meeting so that they can read them and make their own notes and, have their thoughts and not have to do them in a public, we do it in the public forum, but not have to see it for the first time in the public forum and say kind of
one thing that has us handicapped is the Board of Health doesn't have any bylaws. And without bylaws, that means you fall to the Knox County Commission bylaws and rules. And they have rules on when agendas, deadlines are set and when things are shared. So without your own bylaws saying when agendas are set, which we can draw up bylaws, but that you can adopt, but you fall back on the Knox County Commission, and they've got deadlines of the first Monday of each month, I think. I don't know exactly what the rules are, but you all can set rules on when you want things to be included on the agenda. And the important time on the agenda is when you have your meeting, like you did tonight, is to set the agenda in concrete. This is the agenda, and things can be shared beforehand. Okay, does that answer your question, Doctor?
Not really, but that's okay.
Yeah, we need to see some of this ahead of time. I think Dr.
I agree.
Coming like we do and not having the ability to have something in front of us. I think during the week between these meetings, we should have the ability to send something to Mr. Morton. And we have resources, each of us out there, friends who are attorneys who help us write these things, like when I did mine and Dr. Hurt did hers. And, we have people who can help us, but then we could send it to Mr. Morton, and could we then post it so we can at least just see it? We don't have to discuss it among ourselves, but we can at least look at it. And if one of us is proposing it, we could then, if we want to make changes, we repost it to the group just to see it. So we come into the meeting with some knowledge. It's really tough when you don't know what's going to come up.
You got to understand, by Knox County ordinance, the Knox County Law Director's Office is your only attorney. Your friends' attorneys are not your attorneys on this board, on this health board. Okay, but we can prepare agendas and have them available for everyone, but you can't comment and deliberate and consider things. But everybody's aware of that.
So that all makes sense, and certainly to be prepared. I guess the only point of that is then you're in a position of, I guess, really, let me just really get to my question. Is there ever a role for us to vote on an action without a resolution in front of us, to do this in the other order? And the action obviously doesn't take effect until there is a document that has been subsequently approved. We can continue to I mean, this is functioned so far. And so, but the point is, someone may bring something, having written something, and it not, and it not be what the group wants to do, just fundamentally not what the group wants to do. And so, I mean, this is the order at which we're doing this is different than the order that I've done in other things. But here's my biggest concern is that what we are doing is we're making a decision and then enacting something by the way we're doing it. I don't want to lose that speed. I mean, we are able to do it. And so if this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do.
Well, I just suggest, Doctor, if I'm in the loop, I can help do things faster. Okay. And I'm not in the loop on so far. That's my suggestion. If I'm in the loop, that's my job. I'm the deputy law director for this Board of Health. I'm your lawyer. You all are making decisions, policy decisions, and I'm here as your lawyer to assist you, to be your servant. Okay? So I'm here.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm not walking away from this with necessarily a lot of clarity, but I think that we can continue to kind of navigate this as we go.
Mr. Morton, we appreciate your help and offering that to us before things come before the board. I think is a great idea. So maybe early in the week, as things are starting to formulate in members' minds about what needs to be done, checking with Mr. Morton first would be a good idea, and we could at least have it circulated among us without discussion, the same way that scientific information is being, sent forth. I think that's a great idea, and I appreciate all your help with that, Mr. Morton.
Dr. Shamia, there are ways to accommodate what you're talking about. It just takes some setting up and the logistics of creating something like that allows a sunshine body to debate issues in a public forum. That's on the county commission has one where that things get put out there and they could make suggestions and the public can see it. I can't even put anything in there. It's just for commissioners. And so that might be something we could look at.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose this is an unusual decision-making environment because a lot of what is traditionally those types of decisions are not time sensitive the way that I feel like the things that we're going to be talking about are time sensitive. And so I think that if the way it's functioned is the way it needs to function, other than to Dr. Gocher's point, seeing something ahead of time to the extent that we can, obviously will help the conversation.
Yep.
Any other business to come before the board? Any other comments on information that we have received either through the mail or articles or anything that have been received? Any discussion on any of that? If there is none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody. And we will see everyone in about a week, if not sooner. Thank you very much.
Good night.